Welcome back, my friend. The lamps are lit, the wind has quieted, and somewhere in the shadows the Niffler has found something shiny again. But this time, it's not gold. It's a story, and tonight, he's ready to share it with you. So settle in and listen closely. It begins like this.
A drop of ink fell onto the parchment, spreading into a dark stain precisely where the suspect's name was supposed to be. Harry Potter wearily ran a hand across his face, feeling his fingers catch on the stubble he'd forgotten to shave that morning. Again, beyond the window of the Ministry of Magic's second floor, gray March rain drummed against the glass, as though trying to force its way inside this cramped office that smelled of old parchment, ink, and the faint whiff of spoiled potion from the neighboring department. Form 37B, subsection 4, muttered Ron Weasley from behind the adjacent desk, equally cluttered with paperwork. His ears were burning red, a sure sign his patience had snapped. Who even invents these things? Describe in detail the nature of the confiscated enchanted object, including but not limited to color, shape, magical properties, previous owner if known, and probable country of manufacture. It was a kettle, an ordinary copper kettle that whistled "God Save the Queen" every time the water boiled. Harry couldn't suppress a smile. Nearly a year had passed since they'd both begun training in the Auror office, and he still wasn't used to the fact that the greatest enemy after Voldemort had turned out to be Ministry bureaucracy. "Remember how we thought being an Auror would be about chasing dark wizards and saving people?" he said, setting down his quill. The mountain of unfinished reports on his desk loomed like Hogwarts' astronomy tower before its fall. "Defeated you-know-who." Ron spread his arms dramatically, nearly knocking over the inkwell. "And now you're battling Form 37B about confiscating an enchanted kettle. Hermione warned it would be like this. But did I listen? No, of course not." "Ron," she said, "an Auror's work is 90% paperwork." "And I thought she was exaggerating." "She never exaggerates," Harry observed. "And where is she now?" "That's right, already deputy in the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures. After 1 year. Don't remind me," Ron groaned. "I'm embarrassed enough as it is." Their office was so small that 2 grown wizards could barely pass each other between the 2 desks. The walls had once been painted an optimistic blue, but years and nicotine stains from previous occupants had transformed them into something between gray and yellowish. Above Ron's desk hung a portrait of a former Auror, a grim fellow with mutton chops who mostly slept, occasionally complaining about the younger generation not respecting tradition. Above Harry's desk was an empty space. He'd never brought himself to hang anything personal there. Outside, beyond their door with its nameplate reading Trainees Potter and Weasley, the Ministry hummed. Footsteps in the corridors, the low murmur of conversations, the creak of thunderous lifts carrying wizards from floor to floor. Sometimes Harry felt this building lived a life of its own, a vast organism digesting magic, ambition, and hope, transforming them into Ministry directives and reports in triplicate. A sharp knock came at the door. Both jumped, even after a year of relative peace. Sudden sound still triggered in Harry a reflexive urge to grab his wand. He forced himself to relax. Here, in the Ministry, during working hours, surrounded by hundreds of Aurors and officials, he had nothing to fear. But his body didn't seem to believe his mind. The nightmares still came at night. Harry saw the faces of those who died. Fred, Lupin, Tonks, Colin Creevey. He saw Voldemort, his red eyes burning in the darkness. He saw the Forbidden Forest, the moment he'd walked to his death. Sometimes he woke screaming, drenched in cold sweat, and sat for a long time in the dark, unable to understand where he was, at Hogwarts or in his safe flat at Grimmauld Place. He told no one about this, not even Ginny, whom he was with again. Especially not Ginny. She'd already suffered too much because of him. Without waiting for an answer, the door opened and the head of John Dawlish, their immediate superior, appeared. Dawlish was over 50, his hair long since gray, his face decorated with scars, evidence of long years of service. He was one of those old-school Aurors who remembered Voldemort's first rise, who'd survived both wars and emerged neither broken nor whole. In his eyes was a weariness deeper than any physical exhaustion. "Potter Weasley," his voice was dry, businesslike. "Stop fussing with papers. You've got a real assignment." Harry felt something leap in his chest. Finally. For the past 3 months they'd dealt exclusively with trivialities. Confiscated enchanted objects, minor violations of the statute of secrecy. Once they'd even chased an enchanted garden gnome terrorizing a muggle park. Nothing that required real Auror skills. What assignment? Ron was already on his feet, instinctively checking that his wand was in place in his robe pocket. Dawlish entered the office, and immediately it became cramped with three. He placed a thin folder stamped confidential on Harry's desk. Dark artifact on the black market, he explained. Our informants reported that the day before yesterday an object with powerful protective charms appeared in Diagon Alley. Not a curse, not a weapon, but something that attracted the wrong sort of attention. We detained one of the middlemen this morning. He's in interrogation room 3 on the 3rd floor. You need to find out where the artifact came from, who's selling it, and most importantly, what it is. What danger category? Asked Harry, opening the folder. Inside were several photographs, blurred, clearly taken in secret. In one he made out a silver locket on a thin chain, in another, part of a crest or symbol engraved on its surface. Unknown at present, Dawlish leaned in, pointing at the photograph. But look at this. See the symbol? Our experts can't identify it precisely, but it resembles old family crests. Perhaps the artifact has historical value. Perhaps it was stolen from some private collection. But the smuggler we caught reacted nervously. Too nervously for ordinary smuggling. Harry peered at the image. The locket was antique. That was clear even from the poor photograph. The silver was tarnished with age, the chain thick, quality work. And the symbol, something about it was strangely familiar. The intertwined lines suggested a snake or perhaps a stylized letter S. You want us to interrogate the smuggler? Ron clarified. Exactly, Dawlish nodded. His name is Wayland Cross, a petty trader on the black market. Previously noted for selling stolen goods, but nothing serious. However, this time, when our people approached, he tried to flee. Had to stun him. We'll handle it, said Harry, closing the folder. Finally something besides papers. Even if this turned out to be another trifle, at least they'd get out of this office. Good. Dawlish turned to the door but paused on the threshold. And Potter, Weasley, I know you're tired of routine. I know you want real cases. But don't rush. The last thing we need is our most famous trainees causing trouble through impatience. Understood. Understood, sir, they answered in unison, and Harry felt Ron shooting him a sidelong glance. They both knew what Dawlish meant. Don't be heroes. Don't go looking for trouble. Follow protocol. Everything they'd never managed to follow at Hogwarts. When the door closed behind Dawlish, Ron exhaled. Finally, thought I'd die under these papers. Let's go. Harry was already pulling on his robes. The sooner we interrogate this cross, the sooner we'll find out what's going on. They left the office into the long corridor of the Ministry's 2nd floor. Here was housed the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, the largest and most important department in the Ministry. The walls were decorated with portraits of former Aurors, some glaring grimly at passers-by, others dozing in their frames. Passing wizards greeted them with nods, some with genuine smiles, others with marked curiosity. Harry Potter, the boy who lived, the defeater of Voldemort, now an ordinary Auror trainee. For some this was inspiring. For others an uncomfortable reminder that even heroes had to start at the bottom. The lift took them to the 3rd level, where the interrogation rooms were located. It was darker here, colder, and the air smelled of mustiness and something else Harry couldn't identify. Fear, perhaps. The corridors here were narrower, the ceilings lower, and the portraits on the walls depicted stern wizards in judicial robes, witnesses to countless interrogations and confessions. Interrogation room number 7 was small. In the center stood a massive table of dark wood, simple wooden chairs on either side. In one of them sat Wayland Cross. The smuggler was about 35, perhaps a bit older. His hair was greasy, slicked back, his face narrow with a sharp chin and darting gray eyes. He wore a worn robe of dark green that had probably once been decent, but now looked threadbare and faded. His hands lay on the table, wrists bound by magical manacles glowing faintly blue. When Harry and Ron entered, Cross jerked his head up sharply, and in that instant something changed in his face. His eyes widened, his skin paled even more, if that was possible. He stared at Harry, his lips moving soundlessly. "Harry Potter," he whispered, and in his voice was something more than surprise. Fear. Real, visceral fear. Harry approached the table, pulled out a chair, and sat opposite the smuggler. Ron settled beside him, taking out parchment and quill for notes. Standard procedure. One conducts the interrogation, the other records. "Mr. Cross," Harry began in the tone they'd taught him in training, calm, authoritative, but not threatening. You've been detained on suspicion of selling a dark artifact on the black market. We have a few questions. Cross didn't answer. He still stared at Harry as though seeing a ghost. His hands trembled, the manacles clinking softly. You're accused of possessing and attempting to sell a dark artifact of undetermined origin, Harry continued. Where did you get the locket? I didn't know. Cross's voice was hoarse. I swear I didn't know that it was connected to. Connected to what? Ron interjected quickly, looking up from the parchment. Cross shook harder. His gaze darted between Harry and Ron, as though seeking an escape and finding none. I'm just a middleman, he blurted. People bring things, I find buyers. I don't ask questions. Not my business. Who brought the locket? Asked Harry, leaning forward. Something in Cross's behavior alarmed him. This wasn't ordinary nervousness of a detained smuggler. This was something deeper. I don't know his name. Cross licked his lips. He came 3 days ago. Tall, in a dark robe with a hood. Didn't show his face. Left the locket and said someone would be interested. Gave me a percentage of the sale. Describe the locket in more detail, Harry ordered. Silver old. Cross spoke quickly, words pouring out. It has a symbol on it, like a snake or a letter. I'm no expert on crests, but when I held it, I felt something. Magic. Powerful. Not dark, but old. Very old. Where's the locket now? Ron interjected. Your people took it when they arrested me. Cross looked at Harry again, and suddenly something like determination flashed in his eyes. But you need to know, the one who brought it, he said something strange. What exactly? Cross leaned closer, as far as the manacles allowed. His voice dropped to a whisper. He said, soon everyone will know. His son is returning. The last of the Snapes will have his revenge. The silence that fell in the room was deafening. Harry felt cold roll down his spine. Snape. Severus Snape. The man he'd hated, then understood. And then Snape had died, giving Harry his memories, showing the truth that had overturned everything Harry believed. Severus Snape's name still evoked in Harry a conflicting tangle of feelings. Gratitude, for the fact that Snape had protected him all those years. Guilt, that Harry had never managed to tell him he understood. Pain, from memories of cruelty, insults, humiliation, and incomprehension. How could someone who loved so deeply be so cruel to one who reminded him of lost love? After the war, Harry had tried to learn more about Snape. Asked McGonagall to show him his office, looked through books that remained after the professor. Even visited his grave, modest, in Hogwarts Cemetery, beside others who'd died in the battle. But found no answers. Snape remained an enigma even after death. A son? Harry's voice sounded strained even to his own ears. Snape didn't have children. I'm only passing on what I heard. Cross raised his bound hands in a defensive gesture. But there are rumors in Diagon Alley. They say someone's gathering old supporters of the Dark Lord. They say he's using Snape's name. They say darkness is returning. Ron scraped his chair sharply, standing. That's rubbish, he snapped. Voldemort's dead. His followers are dead or in Azkaban. There's no darkness returning. But Harry continued staring at Cross. The smuggler was frightened, that was clear. But in his words was something that resonated with the unease Harry had felt these past months. It was too quiet, too calm. After a dictator falls, there's always a void someone tries to fill. Why were you so frightened when you saw me? Harry asked quietly. Cross hesitated, then exhaled. Because if it's true, if someone really is using Snape's name, gathering old Death Eaters, then you, Harry Potter, will be first on their list. The interrogation continued another half hour, but they learned nothing new. Cross really was just a middleman, a petty traitor who'd been in the wrong place at the wrong time. He was left in the cell, procedural matter until all circumstances were clarified, and Harry and Ron returned to the second floor. Their office seemed even more cramped than before. Harry sat at his desk, spreading out the folder with photographs. Ron stood by the window, watching the rain that hadn't stopped. Snape didn't have children, Ron said without turning. Everyone knows that. Hermione looked through everything possible about him after the war. Nothing. No mentions of a wife, children, even close relatives except his parents who died long ago. I know, Harry replied. He peered at the photograph of the locket, trying to make out details. The symbol on it. Now that Cross had mentioned Snape, he saw it more clearly. A stylized S intertwined with a snake. This could be a family crest. The Snapes were an ancient line, though not particularly wealthy or influential. But Ron finally turned. I hear a but in your voice. But Cross was frightened. Harry looked up. Really frightened. Not like an ordinary smuggler who's been caught. He was afraid of something bigger. Maybe he's just a good actor. Or maybe not. Ron approached, leaning against the edge of the desk. Harry, listen. I understand. After everything we've been through, it's hard to believe it's really over. But Voldemort's dead. You saw it yourself. All the Horcruxes destroyed. The war's ended. It's possible someone's trying to play on old fears, using Snape's name, but that doesn't mean real danger. I know, Harry repeated, and he really did know this intellectually. But something inside, that part that had survived 7 years of being hunted, couldn't just settle down. What do we do next? Ron asked. Harry thought. Protocol demanded passing information up to superiors, letting more experienced Aurors investigate. But something told him that if they stepped back now, they'd lose something important. We need to find the source, he said finally. Find out where the locket came from. Cross said he got it from someone in a hood. That means someone deliberately released the artifact onto the market. Why? To attract attention? To lure someone? Or to distract, Ron added. Maybe the locket's a decoy. While we waste time investigating it, something else is happening. That was a good point. Harry nodded. Possibly, but we still need to start with the locket. Cross said the symbol resembles a family crest. And the symbol looks like... He glanced at the photograph again, like the Snape crest. How can you know that? I saw it, Harry paused. In Snape's memories. When he showed me his memory, there was a house in Spinner's End. On the wall hung an old frame with the family crest. Ron frowned. Spinner's End. Where he grew up. Yes. We could go there, see if anything's left in the old house. Harry, we're trainees. We can't conduct field operations without permission and accompaniment of a senior Auror. What if we just went to look? Not as Aurors, but as private individuals interested in history? That's a protocol violation. Technically, we'd be on our own time, Harry smiled. Dawlish didn't tell us to stay in the office round the clock. Ron sighed, but Harry could see he was already giving in. In some ways, they hadn't changed since Hogwarts. When a hint of mystery appeared, neither of them could just sit it out. All right, Ron finally conceded. But if we're caught violating protocol, I'm saying it was your idea. Deal. Harry was already standing, checking his wand. The rain outside had intensified, turning almost into a downpour. Perfect weather for staying home. Or, looking at it another way, perfect weather for no one paying them attention. Spinner's End was exactly as Harry remembered it from Snape's memories. Grim, a neglected working-class area on the outskirts of an industrial town. The streets were narrow, houses crowded together, bricks darkened by time and factory smoke. Most residents were muggles who had no idea that among them had once lived one of the most powerful wizards of his generation. Harry and Ron apparat into a small alley between abandoned warehouses. The rain here was as relentless as in London, turning the cobblestones into a skating rink. They immediately pulled up their hoods, less against the rain, more to avoid attracting attention. Though who would recognize them here? Remind me why we can't just take umbrellas? Ron muttered as they made their way through narrow streets. Water flowed in streams along gutters, collecting in puddles. Because umbrellas attract attention, Harry replied. And we don't want to be remembered. The Snape house stood at the end of Spinner's End, last in a row of identical two-story houses. It looked even worse than its neighbors. Window frames rotted, paint peeling, the small garden in front completely overgrown with weeds. It seemed no one had entered here in years. Perhaps that was true. After Snape's death, hardly anyone would have claimed his property. In the magical world, he remained a controversial figure. To some a hero who'd given his life for truth, to others a Death Eater who'd got what he deserved. Harry stopped by the gate, staring at the dark windows of the house. Something in his chest tightened. Severus Snape had grown up here. Here he'd been a child dreaming of Hogwarts. Here he'd first met Lily Evans, Harry's mother, and fallen in love with her for life. You sure you want to go in there? Ron asked quietly. Even he seemed to feel something oppressive about this place. Have to, Harry answered and reached for the gate. It opened with a mournful creak. They crossed the garden, their boots squelching in puddles between weeds. Old roses that had probably once been someone's pride among the Snapes had turned into thorny thickets. Harry noticed under one bush a broken toy, a wooden horse nearly level with the ground. Snape's childhood. He tried to imagine the potions professor as a child playing in this garden, but the image wouldn't form. Snape had always seemed as though he'd been born already adult, with that same grim expression. The front door was locked, but Harry expected this. He drew his wand. Alohomora. The lock clicked and the door slowly opened, releasing stale, musty air from the house. The smell of old furniture, dust, and something else, peculiar, that might be remnants of long-forgotten potions. Inside it was dark. The last rays of daylight barely penetrated the dirty windows. Harry whispered Lumos, and the tip of his wand blazed with soft light. Ron did the same, and they found themselves in a small entrance hall. Everything here was covered in a thick layer of dust. The dark wooden floor creaked under their feet. To the left, stairs led to the second floor. To the right, a door to the living room. Straight ahead, a corridor leading deeper into the house. "Where do we start?" Ron asked, looking around. His voice sounded too loud in the silence. "Let's split up," Harry suggested. "You search the ground floor, I'll go upstairs. We're looking for anything connected to the locket or Snape family history. And if we find something, call me." Ron nodded and headed to the living room. Harry heard him carefully opening the door, the floor creaking under his weight. Then the sounds faded, swallowed by the thickness of walls and dust of time. Harry slowly climbed the stairs. Each step creaked as though warning of his presence. Upstairs was a small corridor with 3 doors. The first 2 were open. One led to a tiny bathroom, the second to a bedroom. The third door at the end of the corridor was closed. He quickly inspected the bedroom. This was obviously the parents' room. Double bed with iron frame, dresser, small wardrobe. Everything covered in dust. On the dresser stood a photograph in a frame, Muggle, unmoving. A young woman with dark hair and a man with a stern face. The bathroom was also empty. The third door remained. Harry approached it, reached for the door handle. It was cold to the touch, metal. He turned it and pushed. The door didn't open. Locked. He tried again, harder. Nothing. Then pointed his wand at the lock. Alohomora. The lock clicked, but the door still didn't open. Magical protection. Harry felt adrenaline quicken his pulse. If the room was protected by magic, that meant there was something important inside. He tried several other spells, simpler ones they'd taught at the Auror Academy. Some protective charms could be bypassed if you knew the right approach. But whatever Snape had installed here, it was powerful. Too powerful for a simple unlocking spell. "Bombarda," Harry said quietly, directing his wand not at the lock but at the door hinges. A quiet explosion, and one hinge flew off. The door shuddered but still held. Another spell, and the second hinge gave way. The door slowly fell inward with a dull thud. Behind the door was a small room. Empty. Completely empty. Harry froze on the threshold. His light illuminated bare walls, wooden floor without any carpet, ceiling with cracks. No furniture. No things. Nothing but dust and emptiness. But then why was it so carefully protected? He carefully stepped inside, listening to every sound. The floor creaked under his weight. Harry swept his wand along the walls, searching for hidden panels or caches. Nothing. Then he crouched, examining the floor. The boards were old, some rotten, but there, in the far corner, one board looked slightly different, cleaner, less worn, as though it had been removed and put back not so long ago. Harry approached, crouched, and reached out. The board lifted easily, revealing a small niche under the floor. Inside lay a bundle wrapped in dark fabric. Harry's heart beat faster. He carefully took the bundle. It was light, soft. Unwrapped the fabric. Inside was clothing. Small children's. A pale blue cotton shirt, tiny trousers. Clothing for a baby. And something else, a folded sheet of parchment. Harry unfolded it with trembling fingers. The handwriting was feminine, neat. "Severus, I'm taking him away. Don't look for us. You said yourself it would be better, for his safety. I'll do everything so he never learns about the darkness that surrounded your life. Let him grow free from your sins. Farewell. T." Harry reread the letter twice. Snape really did have a child. A son. And the mother had taken him away, hidden him from the world, from magic, from everything that might connect the boy to his Death-Eater father. But where were they now? Why did no one know about them? Suddenly from below came Ron's shout. "Harry! Harry!" His voice was full of panic. Harry grabbed the clothes and letter, stuffed them under his robes, and rushed to the stairs. He leapt down, nearly breaking his neck on the last steps, and burst into the corridor. "Ron, where are you?" "Kitchen. Hurry!" Harry rushed towards his friend's voice. The corridor seemed endless, shadows from his wand light dancing on the walls. He flew into the kitchen. Ron stood by the window, wand drawn, face pale. He pointed at the floor. "Look! On the old tiles by the back door leading to the yard was a drawing. No, not a drawing, a symbol painted in something white. Chalk, or magic. The same stylized S with a snake that had been on the locket. This wasn't here 5 minutes ago, Ron whispered. I checked the kitchen first. The floor was clean. And now, someone's here, Harry raised his wand, looking around. Or was just here. The back door was open. It swayed in the wind, letting in streams of rain. Beyond it, darkness of the backyard, thickets, broken fence. There, Ron suddenly shouted. A figure appeared in the doorway. Tall, in a long dark robe with hood. The face was hidden, but even in the darkness Harry saw something white under the hood. A mask. Smooth, expressionless, similar to a Death Eater's mask but simpler. The figure tilted its head, examining them, then raised its hand, and Harry saw a wand. Stop, he shouted. Or office. Instead of answering, the figure sharply waved its wand. From the darkness flew a spell, a red beam cutting through the air with a hiss. Protego. Harry managed to shout the shield charm. The beam bounced off the invisible shield, but the force of impact was such that Harry was thrown back, straight into Ron. They both rolled across the floor. The figure was already entering, its steps slow, confident. In the dim light of their wands, Harry better made out the mask, white porcelain with narrow slits for eyes. Behind them, darkness. Stupefy, Ron shouted, rising to his knees. The stunning spell flew straight at the stranger's chest, but the figure unexpectedly quickly leaned aside, dodging. The spell hit the wall behind it, leaving a melted spot. Harry jumped to his feet, wand pointed forward. Who are you? What do you want? The figure stopped in the middle of the kitchen, then slowly raised its free hand to its throat. The voice that sounded was strangely distorted, muffled, as though coming from underwater. You should not be here, Harry Potter. Harry felt cold run down his spine. The stranger knew his name, knew they would come here. Who are you? He repeated. One who seeks truth, the figure answered. That which belongs to him by right. The inheritance that was stolen. What inheritance? What are you talking about? Instead of answering, the figure raised its wand again. But this time didn't cast a spell. Instead it directed it at the ceiling above Harry and Ron's heads. Bombarda! Explosion. The ceiling cracked, and a large chunk of plaster began falling down, straight at them. Harry reflexively grabbed Ron and threw him aside. They fell to the floor by the corridor door, and where they'd stood a second ago, with a crash fell a pile of debris, dust, and wooden beams. Harry coughed, trying to force his way through the dust cloud. His eyes watered, his nose itched. Ron beside him was coughing, spitting out dust. Harry, he gasped between coughs. Where is he? Harry finally managed to open his eyes. The kitchen had turned into ruins. The ceiling partially collapsed, beams hanging at dangerous angles, debris everywhere. And the figure was gone, vanished. They got up, carefully making their way through the rubble. The back door was still open, wind howling through it. Harry ran outside, Ron behind him. Rain immediately drenched them. The backyard was small, overgrown with weeds, enclosed by an old wooden fence. Harry spun in place, looking around. No one. Only darkness, rain and wind. He couldn't just vanish, Ron gasped. There are anti-apparition charms in Muggle areas. But he did vanish, Harry crouched, examining the ground. In the mud by the door were footprints, clear, deep. They led to the far corner of the yard, to where the fence was broken. And there, on the wet grass, lay a scrap of fabric. Harry picked it up. Dark green fabric, quality old. And on it, embroidered in silver thread, a small snake. Part of a robe. The same kind Death Eaters wore. Merlin's beard, Ron whispered, looking over Harry's shoulder. That's Death Eater symbolism, Harry finished. He clenched the scrap of fabric in his fist. Someone's using their symbolism. And this someone knew we'd come here. But how? We didn't even tell Dawlish where we were going. Harry slowly turned, looking at the neglected Snape house. The windows stared at them like empty eye sockets. Rain drummed on the roof, water flowing in streams down the walls. He was waiting for us, Harry said quietly. Left the symbol on the floor so we'd find it. Attacked, but not seriously, could have killed us but just distracted and fled. This was a warning, Ron finished. His face was pale under wet hair. He warned us. Harry nodded. In his head thoughts whirled, trying to piece together the picture. Locket on the black market. Rumors about Snape's son. Children's clothing in the cache. And now, an attack that was more demonstration of power than real attempt to kill. Someone was playing with them. setting out clues like breadcrumbs, leading them somewhere. But where? And why? We need to go back, Ron said. Report to Dawlish. This is serious now, Harry. This isn't just artifact smuggling. I know, Harry still gripped the scrap of robe. Under his other hand, under his robes, he felt the bundle with children's clothing and the letter. Evidence that Snape had a secret. A big secret. But should he tell Dawlish about it? Should he reveal what Snape had so carefully hidden all his life? Harry? Ron touched his shoulder. You with me? Yes, Harry shook his head, dispelling thoughts. Yes. Let's go. We need to get back. They operated back to London, straight into the alley behind the ministry. The rain here was no less. They were already soaked through. They entered through the service entrance, took the lift to the second floor. The ministry corridors were almost empty. Dusk was falling. Most officials had gone home. Only the duty Aurors remained for the night shift. They quickly walked to their office. Inside, Harry immediately went to the window, looking down at the street. Rain, street lamps, occasional passers-by under umbrellas. Nothing suspicious, but the feeling of being watched wouldn't let go. What do we tell Dawlish? Ron asked, removing his wet robes. The truth, Harry replied without taking his eyes from the window. That we went to Spinner's End. That we were attacked. That someone's using Death Eater symbolism. And about. Ron nodded at Harry's robes, under which was hidden the bundle. Not about that yet, Harry finally turned. First I want to understand what it means. Who is that woman? Where's the child now? If Snape really had a son, then where is he? Why didn't he appear after his father's death? Maybe he's the one who attacked us? Harry froze. The thought hadn't occurred to him, but now that Ron voiced it, it seemed terribly logical. Snape's son who grew up without a father, learned the truth and now. What? Seeking revenge? For what? That his father was a Death Eater? That he was abandoned? That he was forced to hide all his life? I don't know, Harry finally said. But tomorrow we'll find out. We'll go to Dawlish, tell him about the attack. Ask for official permission to investigate. And tonight we stay here. Harry went to his desk, sat down. Write a report about what happened, and try to understand what we've got ourselves into. They wrote for almost 2 hours. Harry described events in maximum detail. Cross's interrogation, the trip to Spinner's End, the attack in Snape's house. Ron added his observations. When they finished, the report looked alarming, and rightly so because the situation truly was alarming. They were about to leave when Harry suddenly stopped by the window. Something made him look down at the street, and there, under a street lamp, he saw a figure, tall in a dark robe with a hood, standing motionless, looking up, straight at their window. In the lamplight, Harry couldn't make out the face, but he knew. Under the hood was that same white mask. The figure raised its hand, waved, once, slowly, as though saying, I see you. I know where you are, and I'm waiting. Harry blinked, and the figure vanished, as though it had never been there. Only an empty street in the rain, wet asphalt reflecting the lamplight. Ron, he whispered. What? Nothing. Harry turned from the window, but his hands were trembling. Let's go. We need rest. Tomorrow will be a long day. They left the ministry into the dark, rainy night. But even when Harry operated home to Grimmauld Place, even when he locked the door behind him and turned on the light, the feeling wouldn't let go. Someone was watching him. Someone was waiting. Someone was playing a game whose rules Harry didn't yet understand. And somewhere in the darkness, in the old house in Spinner's End, lay answers, hidden years ago by a man who was now dead, but whose legacy, it seemed, was only beginning to unfold. Morning light filtering through the tall windows of John Dawlish's office was gray and indistinct, typical London March. Harry sat in a hard chair opposite his superior, feeling every muscle in his body protesting after yesterday. Ron beside him looked no better, dark circles under his eyes, hair sticking up in all directions, a fresh bruise on his left arm from falling in the collapsed kitchen. Dawlish was reading their report for the second time. His face remained impenetrable, the result of decades working as an Auror, when you learn not to show emotion. But Harry noticed how his superior clenched his jaw when he reached the description of the attack. Let me make sure I've understood correctly, Dawlish finally spoke, setting down the parchment. You two trainees, without permission or accompaniment of a senior Auror, went on a field operation to a Muggle area. There you were attacked. The attacker used Death Eater symbolism and demonstrated a high level of magical skill. And all this, because of a locket whose origin we still haven't established. Yes, sir, Harry replied, trying to keep his voice calm. but we obtained valuable information. Someone is deliberately using Snape's name and Death Eater symbolism. This isn't random smuggling. Valuable information, Dawlish repeated, and irony sounded in his voice. Potter, do you have any idea how many forms I'll now have to fill in? Report on unsanctioned operation. Report on use of magic in a Muggle area. Report on damage to private property. That house now has a hole in the ceiling. Ron winced. Technically, we didn't make the hole, but... It doesn't matter, Weasley. Dawlish cut him off. You were where you shouldn't have been. You violated protocol. And if not for your special circumstances, he nodded at Harry, meaning his fame, I would suspend you both from the case. Harry felt cold in his stomach. Suspension would mean someone else would take over the investigation. Someone who didn't understand the importance of this case. Who might destroy evidence that Snape had so carefully hidden. Sir, he began, leaning forward, I understand we broke rules. But what's happening is serious. Someone's gathering old Voldemort supporters. Using people's fears. If we don't stop this now... Last echoes of war, Dawlish interrupted. Paranoid fanatics playing at dark wizards. Potter, I've seen this before. After Grindelwald's fall there were such people too, trying to raise his banner again. But they quickly dispersed when they realized no one wanted a repeat. What if this time it's different? Ron interjected. What if someone really has a plan? Dawlish sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. All right, listen carefully. I'll give you one more chance. But this time, strictly by protocol. No independent forays. No decisions without coordination. You gather information, you report to me, and I decide what to do next. Understood? Understood, sir, they answered in unison. Good. The locket is now with the Artifact Examination Department. They promise preliminary results by end of day. Meanwhile, you'll go back to Spinner's End, but officially this time with search permission. Perhaps you'll find something that will shed light on the artifact's origin and the attacker's identity. Dawlish took a stamp, placed it on the permission paper. And take one of the senior Aurors with you. Shacklebolt's free today. I'll ask him to accompany you. Harry nodded, trying to hide disappointment. He'd hoped they could act independently. But on the other hand, having Kingsley Shacklebolt, now Minister of Magic, meant the case was being taken seriously. They left Dawlish's office into the corridor. Ron immediately exhaled. Paranoid fanatics. Doesn't he understand that? He understands, Harry interrupted quietly. Just doesn't want to admit it. If Voldemort had known how many forms need filling after each spell, he'd have surrendered earlier. Ron unexpectedly laughed. You just quoted myself. Because you were right. Sometimes it seems the Ministry fears paperwork more than real threats. They returned to their office. On Harry's desk awaited a pile of new documents, forms to fill after yesterday's incident. He sat down, looking at them with distaste. Form 12G, Report on Use of Defensive Magic in Critical Situation. Form 84V, Explanatory Note regarding damage to Muggle property. Form 37D again, Additional information on confiscated artifacts. Ron sat at his desk, put his head in his hands. I thought the worst was behind us. The worst is only beginning, Harry muttered, picking up his quill. They worked in silence for almost an hour. Outside the window the rain had finally stopped, and through the clouds timid sun was breaking. Harry tried to concentrate on forms, but thoughts kept returning to yesterday, to the masked figure, to the words, "You should not be here, Harry Potter," to the children's clothing he'd found in the cache, and which now lay in his case at home in Grimmauld Place. He'd told no one about this find, not even Ron. Something told him it was important, so important that it needed keeping secret until he understood what it meant. Snape had had a child. Somewhere out there lived the potions professor's son. Or perhaps no longer lived, the letter was old, and the woman called T had died, if Cross was to be believed. But if the child had survived, if he'd grown up not knowing about his father, a knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. Kingsley Shacklebolt entered, tall, imposing, with dark skin and a balanced gaze. He was one of the few Harry unconditionally respected. During the war, Shacklebolt had been a member of the Order of the Phoenix, fought shoulder to shoulder with them, and after victory had taken on reforming the Ministry, rooting out corruption and old prejudices. Harry, Ron, he greeted them, warmth in his voice. Dawlish told me about your adventure. Ready to return to Spinner's End? Yes, Minister, Harry replied, standing. Kingsley, Shacklebolt corrected with a slight smile. Between us formalities are unnecessary. Let's go. And on the way tell me everything in detail. What you saw, what you felt, what were your impressions. Sometimes details that seem insignificant turn out to be key. They operate to spinners end together. Shacklebolt conducted himself professionally. Before entering the house, he cast several protective charms, checked for dark magic, set warning spells in case anyone tried to approach. Caution never hurt, he explained, especially after what happened to you yesterday. Inside the house looked even grimmer than the day before. Gray morning light filtered through dirty windows, illuminating dust dancing in the air. The kitchen was in ruins, collapsed ceiling, piles of debris, beams hanging dangerously. The symbol on the floor, drawn in white, was still there, only now it seemed even more sinister in daylight. Shacklebolt crouched, examining it. Stylized S with a snake. The Snape crest, if I'm not mistaken. He looked up at Harry. You knew Severus better than many of us. What do you think about this? Harry hesitated. How much could he tell? Shacklebolt was reliable, but Snape was a complex man, he finally said. He kept secrets, many secrets, and it seems some of them survived him. Shacklebolt nodded. Wisely said, All right, let's search the house thoroughly. Harry, you go upstairs, check the bedrooms. Ron, you take the living room and cellar if there is one. I'll handle this floor. Harry climbed the creaking stairs. He'd already been here yesterday, but then they'd hurried, searched quickly, not having time for thorough examination. Now he could look more carefully. He entered the room again, where he'd found the children's clothing. The board in the corner was still lifted, the niche empty. Harry crouched, illuminating the cache with his wand. Perhaps he'd missed something? His fingers touched something at the bottom of the niche. Rough, hard. He pulled it out, a small wooden box, no bigger than his palm. It was simple, undecorated, darkened with time. Harry tried to open it, locked. Alohomora, he whispered. The lock clicked, and the lid opened. Inside, on faded velvet lining, lay a key. Old bronze, with an elegant pattern on the head. And under the key, another sheet of parchment, folded in quarters. Harry took the letter, unfolded it. The handwriting was the same, sharp, harsh, Snape's handwriting. If you found this, then the time has come. The key opens a cache in the cellar. There, what I've left for you. What should protect you when I'm gone. Don't trust the ministry. Don't trust anyone who promises easy answers. Magic is neither light nor darkness. It's a tool, and everything depends on who wields it. Be careful, my son. The world is crueler than you can imagine. S. Harry reread the letter 3 times. My son. Directly, without hints. Snape had written this to his child. And a cache in the cellar. There must be something important. The locket? Or something else? He quickly ran downstairs. Shacklebolt was still in the entrance hall, checking walls for hidden charms. Ron came out of the living room. Nothing here. Old furniture, empty drawers, piles of dust. Did you find something? Perhaps, Harry showed the key. Snape left this. There must be a cache in the cellar. Shacklebolt approached. Cellar? I didn't see an entrance. Usually they're hidden, Harry looked around. In such old houses, cellars were standard, but entrances could be anywhere. Behind a panel in the wall. Under a carpet. Or, his gaze fell on a small cupboard in the corner of the entrance hall. He approached, opened the doors. Inside were old brooms, buckets, rubbish. But the bottom of the cupboard, he knocked on it. Hollow sound. Empty. Here, he said. They pulled out the rubbish. Harry crouched, examining the cupboard bottom. There was a ring handle, almost invisible. He pulled, and the bottom lifted, revealing steep wooden stairs down into darkness. Lumos, Harry whispered, and his wand light illuminated the stairs. They descended one by one, first Shacklebolt, then Harry, then Ron. The stairs were narrow, old, some steps sagging under their weight. The smell of dampness and mustiness grew stronger with each step. The cellar was small, with a low ceiling and stone walls. It was cold here, dampness seeping through their robes. But most importantly, in the far corner stood an old oak wardrobe. Harry approached it. On the doors was a lock, old-fashioned bronze. He took out the key he'd found in the cache and inserted it in the keyhole. The key turned with a quiet click, and the doors opened. Inside were shelves, and on them, the treasures of Severus Snape. Not gold or jewels. No, here were books, old volumes in leather bindings, some so ancient the pages had yellowed. Phials of potions, neatly labeled in sharp handwriting. Scrolls of parchment tied with ribbons. Photographs in frames. And on the top shelf, in a separate box, a locket. The same one from the photograph in the folder. Shacklebolt drew his wand, carefully scanned the wardrobe. Protective charms. Powerful, but not dark. He looked back at Harry. Seems Snape really did leave something here for someone. Harry took the locket. It was heavy, cold to the touch. The silver was tarnished with age, but the design still clear, stylized S with a snake entwining the letter. He turned the locket over. On the reverse side was an inscription, Serpentis Custos. Latin, Keeper of the Serpent, or Protector of the Serpent. What does this mean? Ron asked, looking over his shoulder. Don't know. Harry hung the locket back. But there's more here. He began carefully removing items. Books, most about potion making, some about defensive magic, several. He froze, reading the title. Ancient Blood Charms, Protection Through Sacrifice. He set it aside separately. This would need studying later. Photographs. The first, young Snape, about 20, standing by a cauldron, concentrated, serious. The second, the same woman who'd been in the photo with the baby. Only here she was smiling, holding a flower, a white lily. The third photograph made Harry freeze. In it, Snape and Dumbledore. They were sitting in the headmaster's office, between them an unfolded map. Snape looked tired, pain in his eyes. Dumbledore placed a hand on his shoulder, saying something. The photograph was muggle, unmoving, but even so you could see, this had been an important conversation. What's this? Shacklebolt took the photo, examining it. Don't know, Harry replied. But seems Snape kept something important. Memories. Evidence. Perhaps instructions for someone. Ron pulled out a scroll of parchment, unrolled it. There's something written here. He began reading aloud. Teresa, if you're reading this. Teresa, Harry interrupted. That woman. T, from the previous letter. Ron nodded and continued. Teresa, if you're reading this, then the worst has happened. I couldn't protect you. Couldn't protect our son. But I'm leaving this, all that I have. Knowledge accumulated over years. An artifact created for protection. Memories that will explain the truth. I don't ask forgiveness. Don't deserve it. But I ask one thing. Protect our son from the darkness that pursued me all my life. Don't let him become what I was. Don't let him choose the path of revenge and hatred. The locket is the key. It contains encrypted knowledge that will help protect. But it must be used wisely. Not for attack, but for defense. Not for revenge, but for justice. I know you hate what I became. I hate myself too. But please, don't let this hatred poison our son. He must be better than me. He must be better than all of us. Severus. The silence in the cellar was oppressive. Harry felt something tightening in his throat. Snape, the man who'd lived life in shadow, serving two masters, hating both himself and the world, had had a son, and tried to leave him something better than his own life. Teresa, Shacklebolt repeated quietly. Who is she? Why has no one heard of her? Perhaps Snape hid her, Ron suggested. For safety. If Voldemort had found out he had family. He would have used it, Harry finished. He knew this well. Voldemort didn't know love, but understood well how to use loved ones as weapons. If he'd found out about Snape's wife and son, he would have made them hostages, or simply killed them to punish Snape for betrayal. Shacklebolt took another parchment. There's more information here. Dates. March 1980, met T, in North Yorkshire. She doesn't know who I am. Better this way. Summer 1980, she's pregnant. I cannot leave the Dark Lord. Cannot leave Dumbledore. But I can protect them. Spring 1981, Tobias was born. My son. The only bright moment in this darkness. Tobias, Harry whispered. He was named Tobias, after his grandfather, Snape's father. There's more, Shacklebolt continued reading. Summer 1996, Teresa died. Death Eater attack. They didn't know who she was to me, just wrong place, wrong time. Tobias is safe, hidden. But he's orphaned. Like Harry Potter. Irony of fate. Harry felt cold run down his spine. Snape had compared his son to him. Both orphans. Both victims of a war they didn't start. Last note, Shacklebolt turned the parchment. May 1997, left instructions for Tobias. If I die, he'll learn the truth. Learn who his father was. The locket will protect him. Knowledge will help. But most importantly, let him find Harry Potter. If anyone can understand the burden of legacy, it's him. All three turned to Harry. He stood unable to move. Snape had wanted his son to find Harry. Why? To ask for help. To find an ally in him. This explains a lot, Shacklebolt said. Someone knows about Tobias Snape's existence. Someone stole the locket, and now is using the story about Snape's son for their own purposes. But who? Ron rubbed his forehead. And what do they want? Power, Harry replied. Always power. Snape's name still carries weight. For some, a traitor. For others, a hero. For still others, the most powerful potions master of his generation. Whoever's behind this understands, using Snape's legacy, you can manipulate people. They collected everything they'd found in the wardrobe, carefully packing it in an enchanted bag belonging to Shacklebolt. The locket, books, letters, photographs, all were evidence. But evidence of what? That Snape had had a secret family? That he'd tried to leave something to his son? When they climbed from the cellar, the sun was already high. Shacklebolt closed the entrance, cast protective charms on the house. Don't want anyone else getting in here before us. All right, returning to the ministry. Need to catalog all this, analyze it, and find this Tobias Snape. They operated back. The ministry was already at peak day, corridors filled with officials hurrying to meetings, from meetings to lunch, from lunch. Harry and Ron returned to their office, whilst Shacklebolt went to report to Dawlish. Harry sat at his desk, feeling weariness, not physical but mental. Too much information in one day. Too many questions and too few answers. Ron was silent, looking out the window, then suddenly turned. Harry, what if Tobias Snape really is alive? What if he's seeking his legacy? Then we need to find him first, Harry replied. Before those do who want to use his name. They spent the rest of the day cataloging finds from the cellar. The books proved a real treasure. Some were rare editions Hermione would have dreamt of all her life. Progressive potion making, theory and practice, blood protection charms, ancient magic, forgotten traditions. Snape had collected knowledge all his life, and now it all lay on Harry's desk, waiting for someone to decipher his legacy. They gave the locket to experts. After a few hours came the answer. The artifact contained complex protective charms, enchantments against dark magic, and something else the experts couldn't identify. Possibly memories or recorded magical text, they wrote. Requires additional study. When dusk was falling, Harry finally set down his quill. His eyes ached from reading old parchments, and his head buzzed from too many thoughts. Ron looked exhausted too. Home, Ron suggested. Yes. Harry was already gathering his things when there came a knock at the door. A young official from the archives sector entered, holding a folder. Auror Potter, you made an inquiry about Severus Snape. Here's what I found. Harry took the folder, opened it. Inside were copies of old documents. The first, a request from Hogwarts to the Ministry, dated September 1996. Require permission to create protective spell for a minor. Threat to life. Urgent. Signature, Severus Snape, Potions Professor. The second document, the Ministry's response. Request approved. However, note, protective spells for minors are subject to mandatory registration. Provide name and date of birth of person being protected. And the third document, Snape's reply, written in his sharp handwriting. Person protected. Details confidential. Thank you for understanding. And that was all. No names. No details. He asked permission for a protective spell for a child, Harry whispered. A few months before his death. He knew he might not survive, and tried to protect his son. Ron took the document, read it silently, then looked at Harry. What do we do with this? Report to Dawlish. Harry hesitated. On one hand, this was evidence. On the other, if the Ministry found out about Tobias Snape, what would they do? Start searching for him. And if they found him, what then? Arrest him for connection to a Death Eater? Or use him as bait for whoever was now manipulating this story? Not yet, he finally said. First I want to understand more. Find out where Tobias is now. If he's alive, why didn't he appear after his father's death? Why didn't he claim his inheritance? Maybe he's afraid, Ron suggested. Son of a Death Eater. Even if he did nothing himself, there'll always be suspicion. Or maybe someone's holding him, Harry added grimly. Using him as a tool. They left the Ministry late evening. London met them with cold wind and empty streets. Harry operated to Grimmauld Place, to the house that had once belonged to Sirius. Now it was his home, dark, old, but cozy in its way. Inside Creature, the house elf, had already prepared supper. Harry ate without appetite, then went up to his room. Sat on the bed, took out the children's clothing he'd found in the cache. The small shirt smelled of mustiness and forgotten years. Someone had dressed an infant in it. Tobias Snape, son of the man Harry had never fully understood. He lay in darkness, staring at the ceiling and thought. Where was Tobias now? What did he know about his father? Did he hate him for being a Death Eater? Did he understand that Snape had tried to correct his mistakes? And most importantly, who was now using his name? Who stole the locket? who attacked them in Spinner's End. Sleep wouldn't come. Harry tossed and turned, half dozing then waking again. And when he finally fell asleep, he dreamt of the forbidden forest. Dark trees, mist between trunks, and a figure walking towards him. Tall in dark robes, with face hidden in shadow. Harry woke to a tapping at the window. He sat up sharply, grabbing his wand. But it was only an owl, large gray one, beating against the glass, holding a letter in its beak. Harry opened the window. The owl flew in, dropped the letter on the bed, and immediately flew back out into the night. Unusual. Usually owls waited for reply, or at least rested after a long flight. The letter was sealed with black wax. No crest, no signature. Harry carefully opened the envelope. Inside was one sheet of parchment with only a few lines written. Harry Potter, if you want to learn the truth about Severus Snape and his legacy, come alone to the Forbidden Forest near Hogwarts. At midnight. Tonight. I am the one you're seeking. Don't bring anyone. If I see Aurors, you'll never learn the truth. T.S. T.S. Tobias Snape. Harry reread the letter 3 times. This could be a trap. Obvious, primitive trap. But what if it really was him? What if Snape's son really was making contact? He looked at the clock, 10:30. If he went now, he'd make it. But should he go alone? Protocol demanded informing superiors, taking backup. But the letter was clear. If they saw anyone else, contact wouldn't happen. Harry stood, began dressing. He knew he was doing something wrong. Knew Ron would be angry. Knew Dawlish might suspend him from the case. But instinct, the same one that had led him through 7 years at Hogwarts, through Horcrux hunting, through war, told him he had to go. He checked his wand, pulled on his robes, took the invisibility cloak, just in case. An operat. Hogwarts met him with cold and silence. He appeared by the gate, beyond the protective charms of the castle. From here he could see lit windows. There, in warmth and safety, students slept. Children who didn't know how terrible the world beyond these walls could be. Harry walked towards the Forbidden Forest. The moon hung above the trees, casting long shadows. Between the trunks mist swirled, cold, damp. He stepped under the tree canopy and immediately felt the change. Here it was darker, the silence more oppressive, the air heavier. He walked deeper, wand at the ready. Every sound, creak of branch, rustle of leaves, distant cry of some creature, made him tense. He remembered this forest. Remembered walking here to his death, to Voldemort, to the end. Stop! Suddenly came a voice from the darkness. Harry froze, pointed his wand at the source of sound. Lumos. Light tore from the darkness a figure. Tall, slender, in dark robes. The face was hidden by a hood. The figure stood between trees, motionless as a statue. You came. The voice was young male with slight tremor. Not from fear, from tension. I wasn't sure you'd dare. Who are you? Harry asked, not lowering his wand. You know who I am. The figure slowly raised hands to the hood. You've been looking for me. Read my father's letters. Found his cache. The hood fell back, and Harry saw the face. A young man, about 20. Dark hair long to shoulders straight. Sharp jawline, thin lips, and eyes dark, almost black, with that same piercing gaze Harry remembered so well. It was Severus Snape's face. Younger, without wrinkles round the eyes, without bitterness at the corners of the mouth. But the resemblance was incredible. I am Tobias Snape, the young man said, his voice trembling with emotion. Son of Severus. He took a step forward, and moonlight fell fully on his face, illuminating every feature so reminiscent of the potion's professor. And I need your help, Harry Potter. Harry stood motionless, unable to tear his gaze from the face before him. Tobias Snape, Severus's son. Alive, real, so like his father it hurt to look. I know this is a shock, Tobias said quietly, not lowering his hands, showing he posed no threat. I was shocked myself when I found out. Imagine, you live your whole life as a muggle, think you're normal, and then appears a letter from a dead father telling you you're a wizard. Son of one of the most dangerous people of his time. Harry swallowed, trying to gather his thoughts. His Auror training was screaming. It's a trap. Arrest him. Call backup. But something else, deeper, instinctive, said otherwise. In Tobias's eyes there was no hostility. Only fear, confusion, and desperate hope. Tell me, Harry finally managed. From the beginning. Who was your mother? Where did you grow up? How did you find out about your father? Tobias nodded, sat on a fallen tree. His hands trembled as he put his wand in his pocket. Harry remained standing, keeping a safe distance. My mother's name was Teresa Bailey, Tobias began, looking into the darkness between trees. She was a muggle, teacher in a small school in North Yorkshire. Met my father in spring 1980. She told me he was different, withdrawn, grim, but gentle in his way. She didn't know he was a wizard. Didn't know about the war, Death Eaters, anything else. He hid it from her. Why? Harry asked. Why did Snape hide the truth from her? To protect. Tobias looked up, tears glistening in his eyes. He knew that if the Dark Lord found out about her, about me, he'd use us. Or kill us. Mother said he appeared rarely. A few days a year, no more. But when he was there, he was happy. As much as he could be. Harry imagined this, Snape, fugitive from his dark fate, finding crumbs of peace in the arms of a woman who didn't know who he really was. Cruel irony. When were you born? Spring 1981, Tobias replied. March. Father was there. Mother showed me a photograph. He's holding me, looking as though he doesn't believe I'm real. His voice broke. It's the only photograph where he's smiling. Harry's birth year. The year Voldemort hunted the prophecy. The year the world balanced on the edge of catastrophe. And in this chaos, Snape became a father. What happened then? Father disappeared. Tobias wiped his eyes with his sleeve. Mother said he came for the last time summer 1981. Said he had to do something. Something important. And that if he didn't return, she must hide. Change name, move, never speak of him. Tobias looked at Harry. A few months later she heard on Muggle radio news. Strange series of explosions in London. People talked about terrorism. But she knew it was magic. The war had ended. And Father wasn't among those who returned. She thought he was dead? Yes. So she hid. Moved to Scotland, changed surname to McIntyre. Raised me as a Muggle. Never spoke about Father. I only knew he'd died in some accident when I was small. Harry imagined a boy growing up without a father, not knowing the truth. Just like him. Only Harry at least knew his parents were heroes. Tobias didn't even have that. But your magic manifested. Oh yes, Tobias smiled joyously. At 7 I set fire to classroom curtains when a teacher shouted at me. At 10, made library books rain on a boy who was bullying me. Mother knew what it was. She was afraid. Not of me for me. Said I had to be careful. That there were people who could take me away if they found out. She knew more about the magical world than she admitted to you. Probably. Father must have told her some things. Warned her. Tobias sat straighter, his voice firmer. When I was 15, Mother fell ill. Cancer. Muggle disease that magic couldn't cure, even if we'd known where to seek healers. She died in 3 months. In hospital, holding my hand. Last thing she said, your father loved you. Remember that. Whatever you hear about him, he loved you. The silence in the forest seemed deafening. Harry felt something tightening in his throat. Another victim of war. Another woman who died carrying the burden of someone else's secrets. I ended up in an orphanage, Tobias continued. Muggle one. There were unpleasant things. Children who'd survived terrible things. Children who did terrible things to others. I kept apart. Studied. Read everything I could find. And sometimes, when I was very angry or scared, things around me reacted. No one found you? No one from the magical world? No. Mother hid me well. Changed surname, Muggle documents, no connections to wizards. I existed only in Muggle records. Tobias pulled from his pocket a folded parchment. Until I received this. 6 months ago. On my 20th birthday. He handed the parchment to Harry. Harry unfolded it, recognizing Snape's sharp handwriting. Tobias, if you're reading this, then I'm dead. I left instructions at Gringotts, a wizarding bank in London. They were to give you this letter when you turned 20. By then you should be old enough to understand. I am your father, Severus Snape, potions professor at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, and Death Eater, servant of one of the darkest wizards in history. I don't ask forgiveness. I did terrible things. Killed. Tortured. Served evil you cannot even imagine. But then I met your mother, and for the first time in many years felt that perhaps I wasn't completely lost. You are not guilty of my sins. Remember that. Whatever anyone says, whatever fears pursue you, you are not me. You can be better. At Gringotts there's a vault. Number 847. Key enclosed. There you'll find everything, letters, memories, instructions, and an artifact, a locket. It will protect you from dark magic, from curses, from those who might want revenge for my actions through you. Wear it always, and be careful. The magical world is not merciful to sons of traitors. If you're in trouble, find Harry Potter. He's the only one who can understand the burden of legacy. Your father, Severus Tobias Snape. Harry reread the letter twice. Snape had written this before death, knowing he wouldn't see his son grown. Left him everything he could, knowledge, protection, and the name of one person who, in his words, could be trusted. Harry, I came to Gringotts, Tobias said quietly. Showed the letter. The goblin was suspicious, but the key fitted. He led me to the vault. His face darkened, and there I saw the locket was missing. The vault was empty except for letters and books. Someone had taken the artifact before I arrived. Who? Did the goblin say? No, he refused to speak. Only said someone from the Ministry of Magic had made inquiry a week earlier. Asked about Severus Snape's estate, whether he'd left a will, whether there were heirs. Tobias clenched his fists. The goblin couldn't do anything. He said if a ministry official has a warrant, the bank must cooperate. Harry felt cold run down his spine. Someone in the ministry knew about Tobias, knew about the vault, and stole the locket before the rightful heir could take it. What did you do then? I was frightened, Tobias admitted. Didn't know who to trust. Father wrote to seek you, but how? How does an ordinary boy who can't even use a wand find Harry Potter? I rented a room in Diagon Alley, bought a wand, oak and dragon bone, 9 inches, and started learning. Father had books, instructions. I read at night, practiced by day. Basic spells, defense, transfiguration, and dark magic? Tobias paused, his gaze becoming guarded. Father left records, not instructions on how to use for attack, but how to defend, how to recognize curses, how to resist them. He wrote. Tobias pulled out a small notebook, opened to a marked page, read aloud. Magic has no color. There are no light or dark spells. There's only intent. Sectum Sempra can kill or save life by cutting bonds that strangle. Crucio can torture or teach the mind to overcome pain. Everything depends on whose hands hold the wand and why. Snape's words. Philosophy Harry had heard from him many times, and which he'd never been able to fully accept, because he'd seen what dark magic did, seen how it distorted, destroyed, turned people into monsters. But also, he'd seen how Snape used knowledge of dark arts to fight Voldemort, how he'd spied, risking his life, how he'd saved countless people playing the most dangerous game in the world. Show me, Harry suddenly said. Show me what you can do. Tobias hesitated, then stood, drew his wand. His movement was uncertain, not as smooth as experienced wizards. He pointed his wand at the fallen tree. Wingardium Leviosa. The tree shuddered, slowly rose a meter above ground, then just as slowly descended. Expecto Patronum, Tobias continued. From his wand tip burst silver light that condensed into an indistinct form. Not a full Patronus, more a cloud of silver mist. But for a self-taught person learning only a few months, this was impressive. And dark charms? Tobias looked grimly at Harry. Do you really want to see? Yes. Tobias turned to the tree, his face hardening. He raised his wand, and his voice changed, became colder, clearer. Snape's voice. Sectum Sempra. White light burst from the wand, hit the tree. But instead of deep cuts that should have torn it apart, the spell made a precise, surgical incision, a thin line in the bark. Controlled. Careful. Not for killing, but for demonstration. Father taught me control, Tobias explained, lowering his wand. He wrote that the most dangerous thing in dark magic isn't the power itself, but loss of control. Anger, hatred, lust for power, they make spells uncontrollable. But if you keep emotions under control, dark magic becomes just a tool. Harry was silent, considering what he'd seen. Tobias really did command charms Snape had taught. But was this proof he was the professor's son? Or just someone very well prepared for this meeting? Do you have other proof? Harry asked. Besides the letter and ability to use Snape's spells? Tobias nodded, sat again. Pulled from an inner pocket of his robes a small phial, glass, with silvery liquid inside. A memory. Father left several. This one, about the day I was born. He wanted me to see, to know what he felt. Pensieve, Harry whispered. You need a pensieve to view a memory. There's one at Hogwarts, in the headmaster's office. I know, Father wrote about it. Tobias looked at the castle whose towers were visible above trees. But I can't just come and ask. They'd seize me as soon as they saw me. Harry thought. On one hand, this could be an elaborate trap. Lure him to Hogwarts, where Tobias's accomplices waited. On the other, if this really was Snape's memory, it could tell the truth. Show whether Tobias was lying. All right, he said finally. I can arrange with Professor McGonagall. She'll let us view the memory. But, and this is important, I'll keep you under guard. If the memory proves false, or if you try anything, I'll arrest you immediately." "I understand." Tobias held out the file. "I have nothing to hide." Harry took the file, carefully stowed it, then drew his wand. Expelliarmus. The wand flew from Tobias's hand, and Harry caught it. The young man didn't resist, only smiled sadly. "You don't trust me." "I don't know you," Harry replied honestly. "Perhaps you really are Snape's son. Perhaps someone prepared you very well. Until I see proof, you're a suspect." "Fair." They left the forest depths to the edge. Hogwarts towered before them, its windows glowing with warm light. From here Harry could see lit windows. There, in warmth and safety, students slept. Children who didn't know how terrible the world beyond these walls could be. Harry led Tobias ahead, keeping his wand ready. The young man walked calmly, not trying to flee. When they neared the gate, suddenly from darkness jumped a figure. Tall, with red hair, wand pointed straight at them. "Stop! Harry, get away from him!" "Ron." Of course, Ron. Harry wasn't surprised. They'd been partners too long for Ron not to notice his absence. Probably Auror to Grimmauld Place, saw Harry wasn't there, and made the logical conclusion. Letter in the Forbidden Forest. "Ron, wait," Harry began, but Ron was already advancing, his face red with anger. "Wait! You went to meet a stranger, alone, without telling anyone. After we were attacked. After everything that happened." He switched his gaze to Tobias. "And you? Who are you?" "I am Tobias Snape," the young man replied calmly. "Son of Severus." "Lies," Ron snapped. "Snape didn't have children. This is some elaborate scam. You're working for whoever stole the locket. Confess." "Ron," Harry stepped between them. "Let me explain. He might be telling truth. He has evidence. Evidence can be forged. Polyjuice, false memories, anything. That's exactly why I'm going to verify. He has a memory of Snape's. We'll view it in McGonagall's Pensieve." Ron didn't lower his wand, his eyes darting between Harry and Tobias. "And if it's a trap? If his accomplices are waiting in the castle? Then we'll handle it," Harry replied firmly. "As always. Together." "Together," Ron repeated bitterly. "Together means telling each other when you're about to do something mad. Not disappearing in the middle of the night." He was right. Harry knew it. He'd done the same thing again, gone alone, not trusting even his closest friend. Old Hogwarts habits, when he thought only he could solve the problem. "I'm sorry," Harry said sincerely. "You're right. I should have told you. But the letter demanded I come alone, and I thought you could handle it yourself," Ron finished. As always, he finally lowered his wand, but his face remained tense. "All right, but if he tries anything, I'll stun him first." "Won't object," Tobias nodded. "I understand your suspicion. In your place, I wouldn't trust me either." The three of them walked to the castle. Harry ahead, Tobias in middle, Ron behind, classic formation for escorting a suspect. The Hogwarts gate opened before them, recognizing Harry. They passed through dark corridors, their footsteps echoing off stone walls. By the headmaster's office, Harry stopped before the gargoyle. "I need to see Professor McGonagall. This is urgent." The gargoyle slowly moved aside, revealing spiral stairs. They climbed to the office door, and Harry knocked. "Enter," came the familiar stern voice. They entered. Professor Minerva McGonagall sat at her desk in night robes and cap, but with spectacles on her nose, clearly working late. Her gaze assessed them in a second, Harry, Ron, and a stranger. "Mr. Potter, Mr. Weasley," she said, rising. "I hope you have a very good explanation for why you've appeared at Hogwarts at midnight with a stranger." "There is, Professor," Harry replied. "This is complicated, but I need your help. We need to view a memory." In the Pensieve, McGonagall switched her gaze to Tobias, and her eyes narrowed. "Young man, who are you?" Tobias swallowed but replied firmly. "Tobias Snape, Professor, son of Severus Snape." The silence that fell in the office was absolute. Even the portraits of former headmasters who usually dozed or pretended to doze froze, staring at him. McGonagall sat down very slowly. Her face showed no emotion, but Harry saw her hands trembling slightly. "Son of Severus," she repeated. "This is a serious claim." "I know." Tobias pulled out the photograph, the same one he'd shown Harry, placed it on the desk. "I have proof, and a memory my father left me." Harry Potter agreed to verify it in the Pensieve. McGonagall took the photograph, looked at it for a long time. Her lips trembled. "This really is Severus. Younger than I remember him, but it's him." She looked up at Tobias. "And you have his eyes, and jawline, and that same expression when you speak." She set down the photo. The file. Harry handed her the file with the memory. McGonagall rose, went to a cupboard in the corner of the office, opened the doors. Inside stood a pensieve, large stone basin carved from a single piece of stone, filled with silvery substance. She poured the memory into the basin, and the liquid swirled, forming a vortex. Who goes first? I will, Harry said. He approached the pensieve, glanced at Ron. If something goes wrong, if it's a trap, you know what to do. Pull you out and stun him, Ron nodded, pointing his wand at Tobias. Harry inhaled, leaned over the pensieve, and plunged his face into the silver substance. The world spun. Sensation of falling, then solid ground underfoot. Harry looked around. He stood in a small room. Cozy with white walls, carpet on floor, bed in corner. Muggle room in Muggle house. Outside the window shone spring day, sun breaking through tulle. By the bed stood a woman, Teresa. Harry recognized her from photographs. Young, with dark hair, tired but happy face. She held in her arms an infant wrapped in blue blanket, and beside, leaning over her, stood Severus Snape. Harry froze. Snape looked different than he remembered. Younger, about 30, without deep wrinkles, round eyes, without gray in hair. He wore simply black trousers, white shirt, no robes. And on his face was an expression Harry had never seen. Tenderness. Pure, unfiltered tenderness. He's beautiful, Snape whispered, touching with a finger the infant's tiny hand. Teresa, I never thought that you could create something beautiful, the woman smiled wearily. You underestimate yourself, Severus. No, Snape shook his head, his voice raw. I assess myself accurately. I know who I am, what I've done. Hands that hold him have killed, tortured, don't deserve to touch something so pure. But you're changing, Teresa placed her free hand on his cheek. You tell me you're working on something important, trying to correct mistakes. I believe you. Snape closed his eyes, pressed against her palm. You don't know how big those mistakes are. If you knew, you wouldn't let me near him. Then good, I don't know, she smiled. Take him. Hold your son. Snape hesitated, then carefully, as though afraid of breaking, took the infant in his arms. Tobias stirred, opened tiny eyes, dark like his father's. And Snape froze, looking at him with an expression as though seeing a miracle. Tobias, he whispered. My son. His voice broke. I promise you. Promise I'll protect you. From everything. From war, from darkness, from myself if necessary. You'll be safe. Even if it means I can never be a real father to you. Severus, Teresa began, but he shook his head. The war isn't over. The Dark Lord is still strong. And I'm a spy. Double agent. If he finds out about you, about Tobias, he'll use you against me. Or simply kill you to punish. Snape looked at her, tears in his eyes. You must hide. Change your name. Disappear. I'll arrange. Dumbledore will help with documents, with money. But you can't remain Teresa Bailey, who knew Severus Snape. And you, her voice trembled. When will I see you again? I don't know, Snape answered honestly. Perhaps never. If I die. He looked at the infant again. Tell him the truth. When he grows up, tell him his father was a bad man who tried to become better, and that the only real good I did in life is him. Teresa wept silently, tears flowing down her cheeks. Snape handed Tobias back to her, leaned down, kissed them both, first the child on the forehead, then the woman on the lips. Long, tenderly, as though saying farewell forever. Then he straightened, wiped his eyes and walked to the door. On the threshold he stopped, turned. I love you, both of you. Remember that. And disappeared. The memory began dissolving, and Harry felt himself being pulled back. He withdrew his face from the pensieve, breathing heavily. McGonagall's office was quiet. The professor stood by the window, turned away. Her shoulders trembled. Ron stared at Harry with question in his eyes. And Tobias sat, hands folded, waiting for verdict. It was truth, Harry whispered. I saw him. Snape. He really loved them. McGonagall turned, tears glistening on her cheeks. Severus never told anyone. All these years, he kept this secret, even from me, even from Dumbledore, probably. He was protecting them, Harry said. The only way he knew how. Keep them away from war. From Voldemort. Tobias stood, his voice trembling. Then, you believe me? Harry looked at him. At the face so like Snape's. At eyes full of fear and hope. At trembling hands. Yes, he said finally. I believe. You are Severus Snape's son. Tobias exhaled as though dropping an enormous burden. His knees buckled, and he sat back on the chair. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you for believing. Ron lowered his wand, though his face remained suspicious. All right, suppose you really are who you claim. But that doesn't explain everything else. Who stole the locket? Who attacked us in Spinner's End? What's actually happening? Tobias nodded. I know part of the answers. When the goblin told me someone from the ministry had inquired about the vault, I started asking around. Carefully. In Diagon Alley, there are people who know things. Information traders. He pulled from his pocket a folded parchment. One of them sold me this. A list of names. Harry took the parchment, unfolded it. On it were written about 20 names, some he recognized, former Death Eaters who'd avoided Azkaban after war. Others were unfamiliar. What's this list? People someone's trying to recruit, Tobias explained. The trader said a month ago rumors started. Someone's gathering old Dark Lord supporters, promising them movement revival, revenge on those who humiliated them after war, and using me for this. Rather, my story. Snape's son returning to finish his father's work. But you weren't doing that, McGonagall said. No, I didn't even know about it until I heard rumors. Someone's impersonating me, or using my name as symbol. Tobias clenched his fists. The traitor said something else. That whoever's behind this has connections in the ministry. High-level connections. Harry reread the list. One name caught his attention, Malcolm Waverley. He knew this name. Mid-level official in Department of Magical Law Enforcement. Ambitious, smart, always seeking career advancement. Waverley, he whispered. I know him. He works in our department. You think he's involved? Ron asked. Don't know. But if someone in the ministry is organizing this. Harry looked at Tobias. You said you're being followed. Describe them. 2 or 3 different people, Tobias frowned, remembering. Always in dark robes, hoods down. One was tall, broad-shouldered. Another thin, moved quickly. They didn't attack, just watched. As though waiting for something. Waiting till you led them to something important, McGonagall suggested. Or someone. Perhaps to Mr. Potter. Harry felt cold. If Tobias was being followed, if he was being used as bait, then they were all in danger. Now. Here. We need to go, he said quickly. Ron, Tobias, let's move. Professor, sorry for disturbing you at night. Wait, McGonagall approached them. If someone really is trying to revive the Death Eater movement using Severus's name. She looked at Tobias with pity. You're in danger, young man. Enormous danger. I know, Tobias replied. That's why I sought Harry Potter. Suddenly one of the office windows exploded. Glass flew inward, and into the room flew 3 figures in dark robes and masks. They landed lightly, wands already raised. Stop! Harry shouted, but it was too late. Stupefy! One attacker fired a stunning spell at Tobias. Harry deflected it with Protego, but the other 2 attackers were already attacking. Red light, green, white, spells flew from all sides. McGonagall deflected them masterfully. Ron fired back. Harry covered Tobias. Sictum sempra! Tobias suddenly shouted, and white light hit one attacker. But instead of wounding, the spell tore the attacker's robes, revealing a uniform. Official uniform of ministry official. And on the sleeve, symbol of Department of Magical Law Enforcement. They're from the ministry, Ron shouted. The attackers hesitated for a moment, exchanged glances. Then one of them, the one still masked, sharply waved hand to others. Without words, without explanation, they rushed to the broken window. Stop! McGonagall shouted, pointing her wand. But the attackers had already jumped out. Harry ran to window, looked out. They were flying rapidly down the castle wall, using some spell to soften the fall. Reached ground and ran to Hogwarts Gate. They're escaping, Ron shouted. Beyond the protective charms, McGonagall added grimly. From there they can apparate. Harry watched as the figures reached the gate and vanished into darkness. A second later he felt the characteristic warping of air. They'd apparat. Damn, he exhaled. Escaped. But one left a clue. But we learned the main thing, Ron said, picking up scrap of robe from floor. Look. Ministry uniform. Department of Magical Law Enforcement. Harry took the piece of fabric torn by Tobias's spell. On it clearly visible the symbol, official emblem of their department. They're from our department, he whispered. Someone sent Aurors to arrest Tobias. Without warrant, without official notice. Just an attack. But who could give such an order? McGonagall asked. Someone high-ranking, Harry replied, remembering the list Tobias had given him. Someone with enough power to command Aurors. Deputy head, or even higher. Waverley, Tobias said quietly. The name from my list. Malcolm Waverley, Deputy Head of Department of Magical Law Enforcement. Harry nodded. It made sense. Waverley was ambitious, smart, always seeking ways to advance. Create a threat, then heroically stop it. Perfect plan for career growth. No, Harry shook his head, comprehending the situation. He did more. He organized everything from the start. Stole the locket from Snape's vault. Spread rumors about Snape's son returning. Released the locket on black market to attract our attention. And now wants to seize the real Tobias too. To use me as proof, Tobias finished grimly. Show the threat is real. That he's the hero who stopped it. And take Shacklebolt's place. Exactly, Harry confirmed. Classic conspiracy. Create problem, then solve it and gain power. McGonagall approached the broken window, looking into night. What are you going to do? Harry looked at Tobias, then at Ron. Hide him. Somewhere Waverley won't find. And conduct our own investigation. Find evidence against him. Where will you hide him? Harry smiled. The only place no one will think of. Where I hid myself when I needed to disappear. Grimmauld Place. Sirius's house, Ron understood. Exactly. It's under Fidelius' charm. Only a few people know about it. Tobias will be safe there. And the Ministry? McGonagall asked. If Waverley organized the attack. Then we'll work fast, Harry replied. We have maybe a day. 2 at most. Before he realizes we know about him. The 3 of them walked to Hogwarts Gate, the only place from where they could apparate. When they passed beyond the castle's protective charms, Harry took Tobias's hand. Hold tight. Apparition for the first time can be unpleasant. They vanished with characteristic crack and appeared at Grimmauld Place. The dark, grim house number 12 emerged before them, recognizing Harry as its owner. They entered inside. Stay here. Don't go out. Creature will bring food. Harry looked at him seriously. I'll return your wand when I'm sure you can be fully trusted. I understand. Tobias sat on the bed, looked exhausted. Harry, thank you. For believing. For helping. Don't thank me yet, Harry replied. We don't know how this will end. He and Ron left the room. Downstairs in the grim entrance hall, Ron turned. Do you really trust him? Completely? The memory was real, Harry said. Snape really had a son. And Tobias, he's frightened, confused, but not evil. I feel it. Your intuition has saved us many times, Ron admitted. Hope it doesn't fail this time. They apparat to the Ministry. It was already morning, first rays of sun lighting London. When they entered through the atrium, Harry immediately noticed something wrong. A crowd had gathered by the main notice board. Officials were making noise, pointing at something. Harry pushed forward, and his heart stopped. On the board hung a large poster. On it, Tobias's photograph. Where did they get it? And beneath in large letters. Wanted Tobias Snape. Suspected of attempting to revive dark forces. Son of Death Eater Severus Snape. Extremely dangerous. Upon detection, do not attempt to apprehend independently. Immediately notify Department of Magical Law Enforcement. Contact Deputy Head Malcolm Waverley. Harry felt anger boiling in his chest. Waverley was playing ahead. Posted posters throughout the Ministry, possibly throughout London. Now every Auror, every official would be searching for Tobias. And if they found him? He knows, Ron whispered beside him. Waverley knows we've discovered truth, and is playing ahead. Then we play faster, Harry replied, turning. Let's go. We have work to do. The Ministry of Magic atrium was filled with the morning's clamor. The footsteps of hundreds of officials echoed off the marble floor. Fireplaces blazed with green flame, spitting out new arrivals, and a crowd still clustered around the main notice board, discussing the poster bearing the image of Tobias Snape. Harry walked through the chaos, feeling every muscle in his body tense. He hadn't slept all night. Ron, walking beside him, looked no better, dark rings under his eyes, hair sticking out at all angles, his robes crumpled. They took the lift up to the second floor, to their office. But they were met at the door by Dawlish, and his face promised nothing good. Potter Weasley, his voice was cold, official. My office. Now. They exchanged glances and followed him. In Dawlish's office, a file lay on the desk, thick, with a red urgent tag. The head of the office sat down, gesturing to the chairs opposite. Sit. They sat. Harry felt the tension mounting. Dawlish opened the file and pulled out a few sheets of parchment. You were at Hogwarts last night. Without authorization. Without notifying your superiors. He lifted his eyes. Why? Harry hesitated. How much could he say? Dawlish was reliable, but after Waverley's posters, it was hard to know who to trust. We were investigating the locket case, he began cautiously. Found new evidence that led to Hogwarts. What evidence? Information about Severus Snape. His past. Connections we didn't know about. Dawlish frowned. And how is that related to Tobias Snape? The man the entire ministry is currently searching for? Possibly, Harry replied, feeling he was treading on thin ice. But we're not certain. We need more time to investigate. Time is what you don't have. Dawlish placed another parchment on the desk. This is an order from Deputy Head Waverley. You are both being removed from the locket case. It is being transferred to the senior Aurors under his personal supervision. What? Ron leapt out of his chair. But it's our case. We've been on it since the start. You are trainees, Dawlish interrupted, who have violated protocol multiple times, who acted without authorization. Waverley has every right to dismiss you. And frankly, I can't argue with him. You gave him every reason. Harry felt a chill run down his spine. Waverley was playing the preemptive game, removing them from the case, so they couldn't investigate further. Couldn't expose him. Sir, he said, trying to keep his voice level. With all due respect, Waverley might be involved in this case. We found evidence. What evidence? Dawlish asked sharply. Harry hesitated. He couldn't mention Tobias. That would give away his hiding place. He couldn't show the list of names. Who knew how many people in the ministry were working for Waverley? Circumstantial, he finally managed. But enough to warrant continued investigation. Dawlish stared at him for a long time, then sighed. Potter, I know you're used to operating alone. During the war, it worked. But now we live by rules. By laws. And if you have evidence against a deputy head, you need to present it officially. Not hide it. Not play the lone hero. What if the system is corrupt? Harry asked quietly. What if the person we're supposed to report to is part of the conspiracy himself? The silence in the office became oppressive. Dawlish leaned back in his chair, his face weary. Then you must be very, very careful. Because accusations against a high-ranking official without evidence is the end of your career. And possibly your freedom. He stood up, walked to the window, looking out over London. I will give you 24 hours. Find real evidence. Not assumptions, not suspicions, evidence. Names, documents, witnesses. Something I can present higher up that won't allow Waverley to simply dismiss it as the paranoia of young Aurors. You believe us? Ron asked. I believe you are honest, Dawlish replied, without turning around. But honesty isn't enough. Facts are needed. 24 hours, Potter. Don't make me regret this. They walked out of the office into the corridor. Harry could feel the adrenaline pounding in his temples. 24 hours. One day to find evidence against a man who controlled half the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. What do we do? Ron whispered as they returned to their office. Harry shut the door, casting a muffliato charm. We do what we do best. Break the rules. Ron smiled, but the smile was nervous. I knew you'd say that. What's the plan? Harry walked to his desk and pulled a rolled-up piece of silvery fabric from the bottom drawer. The invisibility cloak. He didn't usually bring it to work, but after last night, he decided to keep it close. We do the same thing we did at Hogwarts, he said. Eavesdrop. Search. Find what Waverley is trying to hide. What if we get caught? Then we get fired. Or worse. Harry looked at his friend seriously. Ron, you don't have to do this. It's my idea. If something goes wrong, I'll take all the responsibility. Ron scoffed. Harry, we've been together since first year. You think I'm going to back out now? He took the cloak, unfolding it. Though I thought I was done with this after Hogwarts. Now we're hiding under the invisibility cloak again, like kids. Some habits don't change, Harry smiled. If Voldemort had known how many forms you have to fill out after every spell, he'd have surrendered sooner. Ron suddenly laughed, and the tension eased a little. But both knew the seriousness of the situation. They were about to spy on the deputy head of the department. If they were caught, no amount of fame could save them from the charge. They waited until the lunch break, when the ministry corridors emptied. Most officials had gone to eat, some to the fireplaces to contact their families. Harry and Ron threw the cloak over themselves. It still covered both of them, though the tightness was more noticeable than in childhood, and slipped out of the office. First stop, Waverley's office. It was on the 3rd floor, in the section for deputy heads. The corridor was empty. Only the portraits on the walls looked down. Harry and Ron cautiously approached the door with the plaque that read, Malcolm Waverley, Deputy Head. Locked, Ron whispered, trying the handle. Alohomora, Harry muttered softly, pointing his wand at the lock. A click and the door opened. They slipped inside, closing it behind them. Waverley's office was larger than theirs, but not by much. A wooden desk covered in papers. Bookshelves with standard volumes on magical law. A filing cabinet. A portrait on the wall, some ancient Auror, currently dozing in his frame. "Look for documents," Harry whispered. "Anything that connects Waverley to the locket, to Tobias, to former Death Eaters." They took off the cloak and began searching the office. Harry checked the desk. The drawers were filled with reports, orders, routine matters. Nothing suspicious. Ron searched the filing cabinet, going through the folders. "Nothing here," Ron mumbled after a few minutes. "Everything's too clean. Too proper." Harry frowned. Waverley wasn't stupid. He wouldn't keep incriminating evidence in his office. But there had to be something. His gaze fell on a small box on a shelf behind the desk. Simple, wooden, unremarkable. But something about it caught his attention. He walked over and picked up the box. It was locked. But when Harry pointed his wand to open it, he felt resistance. A magical lock. Stronger than a simple one. "Ron, look at this." Ron came over, examining the box. Defensive charms. Not bad. Waverley clearly doesn't want anyone opening it. Which means there's something valuable inside. They tried a few spells, but the lock wouldn't yield. Harry was about to use something stronger when he heard a sound in the corridor. Footsteps. Approaching. "Someone's coming," Ron whispered, grabbing the cloak. They quickly put it on, freezing by the window. The door opened and Waverley walked in. Malcolm Waverley was around 40, medium height, with neatly trimmed hair and cold gray eyes. He was dressed in impeccable robes, with the deputy head's badge on his lapel. He moved confidently, aware of his importance. He walked to the desk, sat down, pulled out a parchment, and began to write. Harry and Ron stood, barely breathing, watching. After a few minutes, there was a knock at the door. Waverley looked up. "Come in." A young Auror entered, one of the men who had attacked them at Hogwarts. Harry recognized him by his build. The Auror closed the door and approached the desk. "Sir, we followed your order. Checked all known hiding places. Snape is not there. And Potter?" Waverley's voice was calm, but there was a thread of menace in it. "He and Weasley are in their office now. Removed from the case, as you instructed." "Good. They mustn't interfere." Waverley put down his quill. "And what about our allies?" "Everyone is ready, waiting for the signal." "Excellent. Tonight, we'll take the final step. The capture of Tobias Snape must be public. Dramatic. I want the entire wizarding world to see me stopping the revival of the Death Eaters." Waverley smiled coldly. "And Shackleton? Does he still trust me?" "Yes, sir. He suspects nothing." "Perfect. Then after I save the ministry, he'll have no choice but to resign. And the Wisengamot will elect me the new minister." Harry felt anger boiling in his chest. So that was it. Waverley wasn't just planning career advancement. He was aiming for the very top. For the position of Minister for Magic. "There's something else, sir," the Auror hesitated. "Potter is smart. If he finds out the truth..." "Potter is a war hero, but a poor politician," Waverley cut him off. "He thinks the truth always prevails. But in politics, the one who controls the narrative prevails. And I control it. Posters of Tobias Snape are plastered all over London. The press is writing about the new dark threat. Even if Potter finds evidence, who will believe him against me? Against the deputy head, who is heroically fighting the dark forces?" The Auror nodded. "I understand, sir. What are the orders?" "Continue the search. Tobias Snape is hiding somewhere. Perhaps Potter knows where. Keep an eye on him. And tonight, at 8, gather everyone. We'll put on a show they won't forget." The Auror saluted and left. Waverley remained seated, looking out the window with a satisfied smirk. Harry and Ron cautiously retreated to the door, slipping into the corridor under the cloak. Only when they got down to the second floor and into an empty storeroom did they throw off the cloak and allow themselves to breathe. "Merlin's beard," Ron whispered. "Did you hear that? He's planning a coup. A real takeover." "I heard," Harry clenched his fists. "And we have to stop him. Tonight, before 8. "But how?" "We have no evidence. Only what we heard under the invisibility cloak, and that's inadmissible in court." Harry fell silent, thinking. Ron was right. An overheard conversation wasn't evidence. They needed something more. Something undeniable. "The locket," he suddenly said. "Waverley stole the locket from Snape's hiding place. If we find it, prove it's in his possession, that will be proof of theft. And from there, we can unravel the whole conspiracy. But where would he keep the locket? Not in the office. Too risky. Harry started pacing the storeroom. Somewhere safer. Somewhere only he has access to. His house. Maybe. Or, Harry stopped. Or in a vault at Gringotts. Waverley could have taken out a vault in his name, hidden all the incriminating evidence there. But we can't just go to Gringotts and demand access to his vault. No, Harry smiled, and the smile held the same recklessness it had in his Hogwarts days. But we can pretend we are Waverley. Ron froze, then laughed. Polyjuice potion. You're mad. Do you remember the last time we brewed polyjuice? Hermione turned into a cat. This time will be different. We have the recipe, the experience, and most importantly, a hair from Waverley. Where are you going to get his hair? Harry pointed to his wand. Magic. If we get close enough, we can pluck a hair unnoticed. Or find one on his robes, on the chair in his office. They returned to Waverley's office, under the cloak. This time it was empty. The official had probably gone to a meeting. A spare robe hung on the back of his chair. Harry carefully searched it and found it, a single dark hair on the collar. Got it, he whispered triumphantly. Now the hardest part remained, brewing the polyjuice potion. They couldn't do it in their office, too risky. But Harry remembered an old storeroom on the 5th sublevel that almost no one used. They went down there, locked themselves in, and cast the Muffliato and disillusionment charms. Ron pulled out a small travel cauldron he kept for emergencies. Harry began compiling a list of ingredients. Leeches, powdered bicorn horn, boomslong skin, he muttered. Where do we get all that? In the potion supply, Ron replied. On the 4th sublevel. Aurors have free access. We take ingredients for antidotes. They took turns going to the supply, bringing back what was needed. An hour later, the cauldron was bubbling, emitting thick smoke. The potion should brew for a month, but Harry remembered the accelerated recipe Hermione found in 2nd year. It worked in a few hours, but was less stable. While the potion was brewing, they discussed the plan. I'll become Waverley, Harry said. I'll go to Gringotts, ask for access to the vault. Find the locket. And I'll be the cover, Ron added. I'll watch to make sure the real Waverley doesn't show up unexpectedly. If we find the locket, we'll have proof. We'll take it to Dawlish, he'll go to Shackleton, and Waverley will be exposed. What if the locket isn't there? Harry hesitated. Then we have plan B. Which is? A trap. We'll force Waverley to show us where the locket is. We'll spread a rumor that Tobias will appear in a certain place. Waverley will come to capture him, and we'll be waiting and catch him red-handed. Ron nodded, though he looked unconvinced. Risky. What if he brings an entire squad of Aurors? Then we'll use Plan C. We have a Plan C? No, Harry smiled. But we'll come up with one as we go. As always. The potion was ready by 6 in the evening. Thick, muddy brown with a terrible smell. Harry added Waverley's hair, and the liquid boiled, turning dark green. Now or never, he said, pouring the potion into a glass. He drank it in a gulp. The taste was vile, like rotten fish mixed with swamp water. His body began to convulse, his bones creaked, his skin pulsed. After a minute of agony, the transformation was over. Harry looked at his hands. They were now Waverley's hands. Longer fingers, older skin. He walked to the mirror on the wall. Waverley's face stared back at him. How do I look? He asked in Waverley's voice. Like a true villain, Ron grinned. Let's go. We have an hour before the potion wears off. They left the ministry through the atrium. Harry, now looking like Waverley, strode confidently past the guards, who saluted. He felt strange playing the role of the man he hated. Gringotts was nearby. They entered the bank's marble hall and approached the counter. The goblin looked down at them haughtily. How may I help you? I need access to my vault, Harry said in Waverley's voice, trying to sound authoritative. Number 512. The goblin checked the records. Malcolm Waverley, deputy head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement? That's correct. The key, please. Harry froze. The key. He hadn't thought about the key. I forgot it in my office, he tried. But I am confirming my identity. You can see who I am. The goblin looked at him coldly. Bank rules are immutable, Mr. Waverley. Without the key, access to the vault is impossible, even for a deputy head. But this is an emergency, a matter of national security. Then you must return for the key, the goblin snapped. Or provide an official warrant from the Minister for Magic. Gringotts does not make exceptions. Harry felt the plan crumbling. Of course, the goblins wouldn't fall for a bluff. Their reputation rested on the immutability of their rules. I understand, he said, trying to maintain his composure. I'll return later. They left the bank. On the street, Ron turned. The plan failed. What now? Plan B, Harry replied, feeling the polyjuice potion starting to weaken. His body began to pulse, preparing to return to normal. Let's go. We have to get back to the ministry before I'm myself again. They managed to reach Diagon Alley, hiding in an empty shop before the transformation ended. Harry was himself again, and he had never been so glad to see his own reflection. All right, he said, wiping the sweat from his brow. We only have one option left. The trap. Tell me. They sat on the floor of the old shop, and Harry began to lay out the plan. We know Waverley wants to capture Tobias publicly, to make a show, so we'll give him that opportunity. We'll spread a rumor that Tobias will appear at a certain location tonight. Waverley will come with his men, ready for the arrest. And we'll be there, with evidence of his conspiracy with witnesses. We'll catch him in the act. But he's not an idiot, Ron countered. He might guess it's a trap. He might, but he's also ambitious and arrogant. We'll play on that. We'll make it look like the information leaked accidentally, like someone from the department overheard Tobias's hiding place and passed it on. Waverley won't be able to ignore such an opportunity. And where do we set it up? Harry pondered. The location had to be public enough that Waverley couldn't just sweep everything under the rug, but not so public as to cause a panic among ordinary wizards. The Department of Mysteries, he finally said. In the ministry basement. It's always empty there in the evening. But it's official territory. If something happens, we can call witnesses. And Tobias? Will he really come? No. He'll stay at Grimmauld Place. But Waverley won't know that. He'll think he's going for easy prey. Ron nodded, considering the plan. We need witnesses. Someone Waverley can't lie to. Someone with authority. Shackleton, Harry replied. The Minister for Magic. But how do we lure him there without revealing the whole plan to Waverley? Tell him we received information about a possible attack. That his presence is needed for security. He'll come. And McGonagall, Harry added. She was at Hogwarts when we were attacked. She knows part of the truth. If we ask her to be there as a witness, she'll agree, Ron finished. Good. We have a plan. When do we start? Harry glanced at his watch. It was almost 7 in the evening. Now, we have an hour left. They operated back to the ministry. The atrium was almost empty. Most officials had gone home. Only the duty Aurors and a few night shift workers remained. Harry and Ron quickly made their way to their office. I'll write to Shackleton, Harry said, sitting at his desk. You contact McGonagall through the fireplace. Ron nodded and walked to the small fireplace in the corner of the office. He threw a handful of flue powder, and the flames flared green. Headmistress's office, Hogwarts. Meanwhile, Harry wrote the letter to Shackleton, trying to sound urgent but not panicked. Minister, we have received information about a possible attempted attack in the Department of Mysteries tonight at 8 o'clock. The suspect is Tobias Snape. I request your presence as a witness and to ensure security. Harry Potter, Auror trainee. He sealed the letter, summoned a ministry owl, and sent it off. Now all that was left was to wait. Ron finished his conversation with McGonagall and returned. She'll be there, said she'd come through a portkey fireplace at 7:30. And she asked if we were sure about what we were doing. Are we sure? Ron smiled grimly. No, but when has that ever stopped us? Harry laughed, but the laugh was nervous. They were really about to catch the deputy head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement in the act of attempted illegal arrest. If anything went wrong, their careers were over. But if they didn't try, Waverley would continue his game, and who knew how many people would suffer. There's one more thing, Harry suddenly said. He opened his desk drawer, pulled out a rolled-up parchment, the one Tobias had given him. The list of names. Snape's locket. We never figured out what was really in it. The experts said defensive charms and some kind of records, Ron reminded him. But what kind of records? Harry unrolled the parchment, looking at the names of former Death Eaters. Snape spent his entire life gathering knowledge about dark magic, about protection against it, about how to oppose the worst the wizarding world could offer. And he hid it all in a locket. For his son. Do you think Waverley knows about this? He must. Otherwise, why steal it? The locket isn't just an artifact. It's the key to Snape's legacy, to knowledge that could be very valuable. Harry paused, considering something. Or very dangerous. Ron leaned closer. What do you mean? Snape was a double agent. He knew the secrets of both sides. What if the locket contains more than just defensive magic? What if there's information about people? About those who worked for Voldemort? About those who helped Dumbledore? Names, evidence, testimonies? Then Waverley could use it for blackmail, Ron whispered. My God, imagine, he gains access to all of Snape's secrets. Knows who was a spy, who collaborated, who covered up their involvement. He could control half the wizarding world. Harry nodded. It made sense. Waverley wasn't just seeking to become minister. He wanted power over those already in power. The locket wasn't the goal, it was the tool. Then we can't let him keep it, Harry said firmly. Even if we have to destroy the locket to prevent that. What about Tobias? It's his inheritance. His right. Harry hesitated. On one hand, Ron was right. Tobias was Snape's rightful heir. Everything the professor left behind belonged to him. But on the other hand, could the son of a Death Eater be trusted with such powerful information? Even if he seemed honest, even if Harry believed him, a person could change. Power, knowledge, revenge, all of it could warp the best intentions. I don't know, Harry confessed honestly. First, we have to catch Waverley. And then we'll decide what to do with the locket. Silence fell. Both were thinking about what awaited them. Harry felt tired, not just physically, although that too was present, but something deeper. Soul weariness. He remembered how after the victory over Voldemort, he thought it was all over. That the darkness had receded forever. That he could live a normal life. How naive. Ron, he suddenly said, did you ever think we weren't made for this? For what? For normal life. For working 9 to 5, for filling out forms, for slowly climbing the career ladder. Harry looked at his friend. I thought after Voldemort, everything would be different. That I could just be an ordinary person. But it turns out the darkness doesn't end. It just changes faces. Instead of the Dark Lord, now it's corrupt officials. Instead of Death Eaters, it's ambitious politicians. And we're back in the middle of it. Ron was silent for a long time, then sat opposite him. You know what Hermione told me last week? She said you and I can never live peacefully. Not because we don't want to, but because we don't know how to walk past injustice. We see something wrong, and we immediately dive in to fix it. He smiled. She said it's both a curse and a gift at the same time. Seems more like a curse, Harry muttered. Maybe. But imagine what would happen if we didn't interfere. Waverley would capture Tobias, fabricate evidence, become minister. How many people would suffer under his rule? How many innocents would be arrested under the guise of fighting the dark forces? Harry nodded. Ron, as always, knew what to say. They truly couldn't back down, even when they were tired, even when they just wanted to go home, go to bed, and forget everything. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For being here. For not letting me give up. Ron clapped him on the shoulder. We're a team, remember? Since first year. And until the end. He stood up. Now let's go. Time to set the trap. They left the office. The ministry corridors were almost empty. Only the distant echo of the duty guard's footsteps broke the silence. Harry and Ron descended to the basement, where the Department of Mysteries was located. It was the oldest and most enigmatic division of the ministry. Artifacts, knowledge, and secrets that most wizards didn't even know about were kept here. Harry remembered the place. 5 years ago, he had been here when Voldemort lured him through a false memory. Sirius had died here then. He shook his head, pushing the memories away. Now was not the time for that. They entered the large, circular room with countless doors. A table, old and empty, stood in the middle. The light here was dim. Only a few torches on the walls illuminated the space. Here, Harry said. We wait here. Ron looked around. If a fight breaks out, we have places to hide. Pillars, doors, there's room to maneuver. I hope it doesn't come to a fight, Harry replied. If everything goes according to plan, we'll capture Waverley peacefully with witnesses. And when have things ever gone according to plan for us? Harry didn't have time to answer, because one of the fireplaces in the wall flared green. Professor McGonagall emerged from the flames, in her stern robes, wand in hand. Mr. Potter, Mr. Weasley, she greeted them. I hope you haven't called me here for nothing. No, Professor, Harry assured her. Thank you for coming. She approached, surveying the room. The Department of Mysteries. An interesting choice of location. Her gaze rested on Harry. Do you truly believe Waverley will show up? I'm certain. We gave him what he wants most, a chance to capture Tobias Snape publicly. And Tobias himself? He's safe. At Grimmauld Place. McGonagall nodded. Good. Then we wait. The next 15 minutes dragged on unbearably slowly. Harry paced the hall, stopping occasionally, listening. Ron stood by one of the doors, wand at the ready. McGonagall sat on the edge of the table, outwardly calm, but Harry could see her fingers gripping her wand. Precisely at 8 o'clock, one of the fireplaces flared again. Kingsley Shackleton, the Minister for Magic, emerged. He was in his formal robes, his face serious. "Harry," he greeted. "Your letter sounded urgent. What's going on?" "Minister, thank you for coming," Harry approached. "We received information that an incident might occur here tonight. We need your authority as a witness." Shackleton frowned. "What incident? Where is the evidence?" "You'll see in a moment," Harry promised. And as if to confirm his words, the main doors of the Department of Mysteries burst open. Malcolm Waverley entered the hall, followed by 5 Aurors in full battle gear, wands already drawn. Waverley stopped, seeing Shackleton and McGonagall. Surprise flickered across his face for a moment, but he quickly regained his composure. "Minister, Professor McGonagall. What a surprise." His voice was calm, but Harry noticed his jaw clench. "What are you doing here?" "I might ask the same, Mr. Waverley," Shackleton replied coldly. "Why do you have 5 Aurors in the Department of Mysteries at 8 o'clock in the evening?" Waverley was unperturbed. "I received information that Tobias Snape, a dangerous criminal, would appear here. I came to arrest him." "By what warrant?" McGonagall asked. "I have the authority of a deputy head. I can act without a warrant in emergency situations." "And where is Tobias Snape?" Shackleton asked, looking around. "I don't see any suspect here." Waverley shifted his gaze to Harry, and understanding flashed in his eyes. "A trap. You set a trap for me, Potter." "No," Harry replied calmly. "I just gave you an opportunity to show your true intentions. And you took it." "What do you mean?" Shackleton interjected. Harry took a step forward. "Minister, Malcolm Waverley organized an entire conspiracy. He stole a locket from Severus Snape's vault at Gringotts, spread rumors about Snape's returning son, hired people to impersonate Death Eaters. All of this to create a threat, then heroically overcome it and take your place." The silence in the hall was absolute. Shackleton stared at Waverley, unblinking. McGonagall stood up from the table, wand at the ready. The Aurors behind Waverley exchanged glances, clearly bewildered. "These are absurd accusations," Waverley finally managed, but his voice was no longer so confident. "You have no proof whatsoever." "We do," Harry countered. "We overheard your conversation in your office today. You personally spoke about your plan to overthrow Shackleton, about how you would use Tobias Snape as proof of the threat. An overheard conversation is not evidence in court." "But there's something else," Ron interjected. "Your men attacked us at Hogwarts, Aurors in official department robes, without a warrant, without authorization. We have a scrap of their uniform with your emblem." "And I was a witness to that attack," McGonagall added. "I can confirm every word." Waverley took a step back. His face flushed red, his eyes narrowed. "You don't understand. I did this for the safety of the wizarding world. Shackleton is too soft. He allows former Death Eaters to walk free, allows dark wizards to evade punishment. Someone has to restore order. By fabricating evidence? By persecuting the innocent?" Shackleton stepped forward, and there was steel in his voice. "Malcolm, you crossed a line. Not for safety, but for your own ambition. You have no right to judge me." Waverley suddenly roared. "I've done more for the ministry in the last year than you have in your entire term. I was catching real criminals while you sat in your office signing papers." He raised his wand, and Harry instantly knew Waverley was not going to surrender peacefully. "Stop!" Shackleton cried, but Waverley was already acting. He sharply swung his wand, and the locket flew out of a pouch on his belt, the same silver one with Snape's symbol. It hovered in the air, began to spin, glowing with a blue light. "If I can't be minister," Waverley hissed, "then no one will." "Aprio!" The locket opened, and a stream of silver mist erupted from it. Memories. Dozens, hundreds of memories, swirling through the hall like a vortex. Harry saw faces, Snape, Dumbledore, Voldemort. Heard voices, screams, spells. He activated all the memories at once. McGonagall shouted, "It could damage the locket forever." Waverley laughed madly. "Let it burn. If I can't have this knowledge, no one will." Harry didn't think. He lunged forward, stretching out his hand toward the locket. But Waverley was quicker. He snatched the artifact and pressed it to his chest. "Back!" he shouted, backing toward the door. The Aurors behind him hesitated, unsure whose side to take. "Everyone back, or I'll destroy it." "Don't be a fool," Shackleton tried. "You'll only make your situation worse." "My situation can't get any worse." Waverley stood by the door, his eyes wild. But I won't let Potter win. Not after everything. He raised his free hand, pointing his wand at the locket. He began chanting a spell, something ancient, dark, that Harry didn't recognize. "No!" he yelled, lunging forward. But suddenly, one of the doors in the hall opened, and Tobias Snape walked out. Harry froze. What was he doing here? He was supposed to stay at Grimmauld Place. Tobias looked at Waverley, and his face turned to stone. He raised his wand, the same one Harry had taken from him, but which creature had evidently returned. Expelliarmus! The disarming charm shot from his wand with such force that Harry barely managed to swerve. It hit Waverley, and the locket flew from his hands, soaring across the hall. Harry scrambled after it, sliding on the floor. He caught the locket a moment before it would have hit the stone floor, and perhaps shattered. The silver metal was hot to the touch, pulsing with magic. "How did you get here?" he gasped, looking at Tobias. "Creature said you went to a dangerous place," Tobias replied, not taking his eyes off Waverley. "I couldn't sit and wait while someone else risked their life for my legacy." Waverley got up from the floor, his wand having fallen somewhere to the side. He was disarmed, surrounded by Shackleton's Aurors and McGonagall, but a cold fury still burned in his eyes. "You all don't understand anything," he screamed. "Snape was a traitor. His son is a traitor, too. They should be destroyed, not protected. My father was a hero," Tobias said quietly but firmly. "He gave his life saving the wizarding world. And you are simply an ambitious man without honor." Harry gripped the locket in his hand. It was still pulsing, still letting out thin wisps of silver mist, memories trying to break free. He had to close it, to stop the leak of information before everything was lost forever. He raised his wand. Clauder Mentem. The spell, which McGonagall had taught him back at school for closing Pensieves and sealing memories. The locket glowed brighter, then gradually darkened, the memories being pulled back inside. In a moment, it was once again just an old silver locket, silent and inert. Harry exhaled. It worked. Snape's legacy was safe. "Arrest him," Shackleton ordered, nodding towards Waverley. 2 Aurors from Waverley's squad, the ones who had realized on whose side the truth must lie, stepped forward and placed magical manacles on the former deputy head. Waverley offered no resistance. He just stood, staring into the void, knowing it was over. "Malcolm Waverley," Shackleton said formally, "you are arrested on charges of abuse of authority, fabrication of evidence, illegal persecution, theft from Gringotts, and conspiracy to seize the office of Minister for Magic. You will be taken to a holding cell where you will await trial by the Wisengamot." The Aurors escorted Waverley towards the exit. He walked with his head bowed, all ambition and confidence evaporated. By the door he stopped, turned, and looked at Harry. "You think you've won, Potter?" His voice was husky. "But the darkness doesn't disappear. It merely waits. And someday, someone else will finish what I started." "Perhaps," Harry replied calmly. "But we'll be waiting. As always." Waverley gave a twisted smile and allowed the Aurors to lead him out of the chamber. When the doors closed behind him, Shackleton turned to Harry. "I need a full report. Everything you know. All the evidence you collected." "Here, Minister," Harry offered him the locket. "But there is one thing. Tobias Snape is the rightful owner of this artifact. It is his father's legacy." Shackleton took the locket, turning it carefully in his hands. Severus Snape's legacy. Who would have thought he had a secret family? He looked at Tobias, who stood slightly apart, holding onto the back of a chair. "Young man, I am very sorry for what you have been put through. Your father was a complex man, but a true hero. You should know that." "Thank you, Minister," Tobias replied softly. "I'm only beginning to understand who he truly was." Shackleton handed him the locket. "This belongs to you. But," he looked serious, "I must ask you to be careful with what it contains. Your father amassed knowledge that could be dangerous in the wrong hands." "I understand." Tobias took the locket, clenching it in his palm. "My father wrote in his letters, magic has no color. Everything depends on the intentions of the one who uses it." "Wise words," McGonagall nodded, approaching. "Mr. Snape, if you wish to truly understand your father's legacy, to study his knowledge properly, I can offer you a place at Hogwarts. Not as a student, you are too old for that, but as a librarian's assistant or a potions department aide. It will give you access to books, to knowledge, to people who knew your father." Tobias looked up, surprised. You really want to take me in? The son of a Death Eater?" "I want to take in the son of Severus Snape," McGonagall corrected. "A man who saved countless lives with his bravery." You are not responsible for your father's sins, but you can continue his good work." Tobias was silent for a long time, then nodded. I will consider it. Thank you." Harry felt a warmth spread through his chest. Perhaps not all was lost. Perhaps Snape's son truly had a chance to become better than his father, to live not in the shadow of the past, but in the light of the future. Shackleton walked over to Harry and Ron. "You both showed outstanding courage tonight, and, I must admit, you broke about a dozen ministry rules." He smiled. "But the end justifies the means. You saved the ministry from a corrupt official who could have caused enormous harm." "Thank you, sir," Harry replied. "But we were only doing our job." "A job that experienced Aurors would be afraid to do," Shackleton countered. "Dawlish will be proud of you, although he'll probably yell at you for acting unilaterally first." Ron smirked. "We're used to that." They left the Department of Mysteries together. Voices were already echoing in the ministry corridors. The news of Waverley's arrest had spread like wildfire. Officials were gathering in groups, discussing the unbelievable fact. The deputy head of the department had turned out to be a conspirator. Harry and Ron returned to their office. It was nearly 10 in the evening. They sat in silence, too exhausted to even speak. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving only fatigue. "We did it," Ron finally whispered. "Honestly, we did it." "Yeah," Harry leaned back in his chair. "But you know what? I don't want to be a hero anymore. I just want to fill out forms. Catch smugglers of enchanted teapots. Live a boring, predictable life as an Auror trainee." Ron laughed. "You're lying. You'd last a week, maybe. And then you'd dive into something crazy again." "Maybe," Harry admitted with a smile. "But at least a week. One calm week is all I ask for." Suddenly, the door opened and Dawlish walked in. His face was tired, but his eyes held a flicker of something close to pride. "Potter Weasley. Shackleton told me everything." He walked up to their desks, crossing his arms over his chest. "You violated protocol, acted without authorization, risked not only your lives, but the reputation of the entire department." They both braced themselves for the reprimand. "And," Dawlish continued with a barely noticeable smile, "you saved the ministry from the most dangerous internal threat since Voldemort. Shackleton is recommending you both for early completion of your traineeship and promotion to full Aurors." Harry and Ron stared at him. "You seriously?" Ron managed to gasp. "Absolutely. Although," Dawlish frowned, "if you ever do anything like this again without consulting me, I will personally ensure you are transferred to the register of enchanted objects for the rest of your careers." "Understood." "Yes, sir," they replied in unison. Dawlish nodded and turned to the door. He paused on the threshold. "By the way, Potter, that Tobias Snape, do you really believe he poses no threat?" Harry thought. He remembered Tobias's face as he held his father's locket. He remembered how he used Expelliarmus to disarm Waverley, not something darker. He remembered Snape's words from the memory. "He must be better than me." "Yes, sir," he answered confidently. "I believe it. He is not his father. He has a chance to be better." "I hope you're right," Dawlish said and left. Harry and Ron were left alone. Outside the window, London slept, the city lights twinkling in the darkness. Somewhere out there at Grimmauld Place, Tobias Snape held his father's legacy in his hands: knowledge, memories, secrets. What would he do with them? Use them for good? For revenge? For something else? Harry didn't know. But he had made a choice to trust. To give Snape's son the same chance that Snape himself had once been given. A chance to right wrongs. A chance to be better. "Harry," Ron said suddenly, "remember first year, when we thought Snape wanted to steal the Philosopher's Stone? Yes. We were so wrong about him. And now we're trusting his son with an artifact that contains all his secrets." Ron smiled. "Funny how the world works, isn't it?" "Irony," Harry agreed. "But perhaps it's right. Perhaps it was meant to be this way all along. Snape lived a life in secrecy in the shadows. His son deserves the light." They sat for a few more minutes, then gathered their things to go home. Harry was locking the office door when he suddenly had a strange feeling, as if someone was watching him. He turned, looking out the window. There, across the street, stood a figure, tall in dark robes. For a moment, Harry froze, his hand instinctively reaching for his wand. But the figure raised a hand, not menacingly, but almost in gratitude. A nod, and then it turned and walked away, dissolving into the crowd of late passers-by. Tobias? Or someone else? Harry didn't know, and perhaps he didn't want to know. "What is it?" Ron asked. "Nothing," Harry replied, turning away from the window. Just my imagination. Let's go home. They operated from the ministry into the dark March night. Tomorrow would be a new day. New cases, new forms to fill out, new challenges. But today they had won. Not against a dark lord, not against an army of Death Eaters, but against something perhaps even more dangerous, corruption within the system they had sworn to protect. Harry Potter walked through the streets of London, feeling the fatigue in every muscle. But also something else. Satisfaction. Not from fame, not from recognition, but from the realization that he had done the right thing, that he had protected an innocent, that he had stopped a villain. Perhaps the war with Voldemort was over, but the war for justice never would be. There would always be people like Waverley. There would always be those who sought power at any cost. And there would always be people like Harry Potter and Ron Weasley to stand in their way, even if it meant filling out Form 37B in triplicate. The morning sun streamed through the windows of the second-floor office at the ministry, casting golden strips across the paper-strewn desks. Harry Potter sat, staring at a blank sheet of parchment before him. The quill rested in his hand, a drop of ink suspended at the tip. Form 89A, Ron muttered from the next desk. Full report on the operation to apprehend a high-ranking ministry official. 37 questions. 37. Harry smiled. Remember when we thought everything would be simpler after Voldemort? Oh yeah, Ron leaned back in his chair. Defeat the Dark Lord, and then we can just live. What naivety. It turns out, defeating one villain doesn't mean the darkness is gone. Harry began to write, his handwriting neat after a year of practice. It just changes its face. They worked in silence for about an hour. The ministry was coming alive around them. Footsteps, voices, the creak of lifts could be heard. Somewhere on the third floor, the investigation into Waverley's case was underway. But Harry and Ron were filling out forms. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. "Come in," Harry said. Tobias Snape entered. He looked different than yesterday, calmer, more composed. He held a small bag in his hands. "Harry, Ron," he greeted quietly. "I'm sorry to bother you. I need to ask a favor." He took the locket out of the bag, silver, with a stylized snake. "I couldn't sleep last night," Tobias said, looking at the artifact. "I held it and wondered, what's inside? What were my father's final words to me?" His voice trembled. "I never knew him, and now I have a chance to see him. The real him." He looked at Harry with hope and fear. "Please, be there when I learn the truth. My father wrote in the letter, 'If you are ever in trouble, find Harry Potter.' Help me understand who my father was." Harry felt a lump in his throat. Snape had entrusted him with the most precious thing, his son. "Of course," he replied. "We'll be here. Both of us," Ron added. The memory review chamber was small. Stone walls, magical torches, and in the middle, a massive table with a pensieve. A large granite basin filled with a slowly swirling silvery substance. Harry closed the door and cast a silencing charm. Tobias approached the pensieve, his hands shaking. "How do I open the locket?" Harry examined the artifact, finding a small symbol on the back, a stylized S. He touched it with his wand. A per memoriam. The locket clicked open. Inside, a silvery liquid. "Memories. Pour them into the pensieve," Harry said gently. Slowly, Tobias tilted the locket, and a silvery stream flowed into the basin. The liquid swirled faster, forming a vortex. "We'll go together," Harry offered his hand. "All three of us." They stood around the pensieve, holding hands. On 3. 1, 2, 3. They plunged into the memory. First memory. A small room. A white wall, a bed, a window with spring sun. Severus Snape stood by the window, young, about 30 years old. He was holding something small, wrapped in a blue blanket. "A baby." "Tobias," Snape whispered, his voice trembling. "My son." He pressed the child to his chest, lowering his head. His shoulders shook. He was crying silently. "I don't deserve you," he said to the infant. "My hands are stained, but you are pure, innocent, and I will do everything to protect you, even if it means you will never know who I am." He laid the baby on the bed. He pulled out his wand, began waving it over the child, uttering complex incantations. Protection charms, layer after layer. "No curse shall touch you," Snape mumbled. "No dark magic shall find you. I will seal you away from everything that haunts me." The spell concluded with a golden flash. Snape sank to the floor beside the bed, exhausted. "I can't be a real father," he whispered. "War takes everything, but I will leave you something. Knowledge. Truth. When you grow up, you will find out who I was. And then you can choose to forgive or to hate. The memory dissolved. They emerged from the Pensieve. Tobias was wiping his eyes, unashamed of his tears. He loved you, Harry said softly. From the first moment. I know, Tobias nodded, his voice catching. But there are more memories. I can feel it. Harry checked the locket. Yes, there was still silvery liquid inside. Ready to continue? Yes. Second memory. A basement. Cold, dark, lit by candles. Snape stood by a wall, older now, about 35, tired. He was drawing complex symbols with his wand. It has to withstand even the Dark Lord, he muttered. The symbols flared blue. When the light faded, a niche appeared in the wall. Snape began placing objects inside. Books, vials of potions, parchments, and finally, the locket. Everything most precious, he whispered. The knowledge I collected all my life. For him. For my son. He raised his wand over the locket. Memoria in fundo. Silvery light flowed from the old wand, memories. One by one, they poured into the locket. Harry saw flashing images. Snape with Voldemort, with Dumbledore, alone in the darkness. Everything I know about survival, Snape said. Everything that can protect. I give you this not for revenge, not for power, but for protection, so you can protect yourself and those you love. The last memory poured in. The locket shone, then darkened. Snape sealed the niche with protective charms. He stood for a long time, looking at the wall. Perhaps you will never find this, he whispered. But if you do, if Harry Potter helps, as I asked, then you will understand that even the darkest person can leave behind a light. The memory dissolved. They came out. Tobias was openly weeping. Why didn't he run away with us? His voice broke. We could have been a family. Because he served two masters, Harry replied quietly. Voldemort and Dumbledore. If he had run, both would have found him, and used you against him. He chose the most brutal path, to live without you, so you could live. It was an act of love, Ron added. The strongest magic. Tobias nodded, wiping his face. After a minute, he looked at the locket. There's one more memory. The last one. I feel it, it's different. Stronger. Harry peered into the locket. Yes, more silvery liquid, thicker, brighter. It must be his final message, he said. Recorded before his death. Ready? Yes. Third memory. The headmaster's office at Hogwarts. Round, with high ceilings, filled with strange instruments. Portraits on the walls. Dumbledore sat at the desk, old, tired. Snape stood opposite the table. Bloodstains on his robes, hair falling over his face, hands shaking. Severus, sit down, Dumbledore said gently. No time, Snape cut in. The Dark Lord suspects. Soon he will know that the traitor is me. I will die. Soon. Dumbledore stood up and approached. What troubles you? Not death. You accepted it long ago. Snape turned, his face etched with pain. My son, Tobias. He's 16 now. He doesn't know about me. He lives as a muggle, safe, hidden. You want him to know the truth. When he's an adult, when he can understand. Snape pulled out the locket. I've recorded the memories. Left instructions at Gringotts. On his 20th birthday, he will receive a letter. And what do you need from me? Snape looked Dumbledore in the eye. If I die, and I will die, Albus, ask Harry Potter to protect my son. Dumbledore raised an eyebrow. Harry? But you? Hate him? Snape smiled bitterly. No, I hate that he reminds me of James. But I also see Lily. Her kindness. Her strength. He took a step closer, his voice becoming a plea. If anyone can understand the burden of a name, the burden of a legacy, it is Harry Potter. Albus, I beg you, when it's all over, when the Dark Lord is defeated, find Harry. Tell him about Tobias. Ask him to help. Dumbledore nodded slowly. If I survive, Severus. If I survive, then leave a note. A letter. Instructions. Something. Snape clenched his fists. My son cannot be left alone. He will have the locket, the knowledge, the memories. But he needs someone to show him how to use it correctly. Someone to show him that one can choose the light even after darkness. I will do what I can, Dumbledore promised. Snape nodded. He walked to the Pensieve in the corner of the office, pulling a thin stream of silver from his temple with his wand. Another memory. This is for Tobias, he said, looking at the silver thread. My final words to him. And, he hesitated, for Harry Potter. If he sees this. He took out the locket, carefully pouring the memory inside. The silver disappeared into the artifact. It's done, Snape whispered. I did everything I could. Now all that remains is to fulfill your duty to the end, Dumbledore finished quietly. Snape nodded. He looked at the headmaster one last time. Thank you, Albus, for everything, for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. You were the bravest man I ever knew, Severus. Snape smiled sadly and left the office. The memory began to fade, but before it completely vanished, Harry heard a voice, not from the memory, but as if recorded separately, magically woven into the very fabric of the memory. Tobias, my son, if you hear this, it means I didn't return. Forgive me. Forgive me for not being there. For not being able to teach you magic, show you Hogwarts, tell you about the world that awaits you. I was a bad person. I did terrible things. But the only good thing I created in life is you. Remember, magic is neither dark nor light. It is what you make it. Choose wisely. Choose kindness, even when it's hard. Choose light, even when darkness seems easier. And Harry Potter, if you see this. Snape's voice broke, becoming almost inaudible. I never told you this while I was alive. I couldn't. But you need to know. I protected you not only for Lily. I protected you because you were better than me. You chose the light, even when you had every reason to choose darkness. You became a hero without knowing what it meant. Protect my son, Harry. Show him that a legacy doesn't define a person, that we choose who we are. Don't let him repeat my mistakes. I beg you. The voice faded. The memory finally dissolved. They stood by the Pensieve in absolute silence. Tobias was weeping, his head buried in his hands. Ron wiped his eyes with his sleeve, and Harry just stood there, feeling that something huge and important had just happened. Snape asked him, didn't order, didn't demand, asked, and entrusted him with the most precious thing. Harry, Tobias finally whispered, raising his head. His face was wet with tears, but his eyes shone with something new, understanding, acceptance. My father, he really loved me, didn't he? Yes. Harry sat down next to him, placing a hand on Tobias's shoulder. More than anything in the world. He gave up everything so you could be safe, even the chance to be your father. Now I understand why he left me. Tobias wiped his face. Not because he didn't love me, but because he loved me too much. Ron approached, squatting down in front of them. Your father was a complex person, Tobias. He did many bad things, but in the end, he made the right choice. And you have that same choice. What to do with the legacy he left. Tobias nodded. He looked at the locket in his hands. Knowledge. He left me all his knowledge. About dark magic, about defense, about potions. What should I do with it? Harry pondered. This was an important question. The locket contained the legacy of one of the most powerful wizards of his generation. In the wrong hands, it could become a weapon. In the right hands, a protection. There's an option, he said slowly. Professor McGonagall offered you a position at Hogwarts, as a librarian's assistant or a potions aide. I remember. If you accept her offer, the locket and your father's knowledge can be transferred to Hogwarts, to the restricted section of the library, under the headmistress's protection. Harry looked Tobias in the eye. And you will have access as a researcher. You can study your father's legacy, but under supervision, under McGonagall's guidance. You want me to give up the locket? Tobias clutched the artifact. No, Harry shook his head. I want you to make a choice. It's your legacy. You're right. But think, your father didn't leave this so you could hide it in a vault. He wanted this knowledge to be used, to help, to protect. If the locket is at Hogwarts, Ron added, it will be safe, but also accessible, to those who truly need it, to researchers, students, Aurors. Tobias was silent for a long time. He looked at the locket, his fingers touching the engraving, the snake coiled around the letter S. My father told Dumbledore, show Harry how to choose the light, he finally whispered. He trusted you to help me make the right choice. Yes. Then I trust your advice. Tobias held out the locket to Harry. Take it to Hogwarts. Give it to Professor McGonagall. And I will accept her offer. I want to study my father's legacy, understand his knowledge, use it for good. Harry took the locket. It was warm from Tobias's touch, heavy with the memories it contained. Your father would be proud of you, he said softly. Tobias smiled through his tears. I hope so. 2 weeks passed. Harry sat in the office, filling out yet another form. The Waverley case was closed. The former deputy had received 10 years in Azkaban for abuse of power and conspiracy. His accomplices were also arrested. The ministry was slowly recovering from the scandal, and Harry Potter and Ron Weasley returned to the routine. Forms, reports, minor cases. This week they were investigating the theft of enchanted garden gnomes. Last week, illegal trading in love potions. Routine. Boring, predictable, safe. And somehow, Harry felt satisfied. One more form, Ron mumbled, signing a document. You know, the next time the chief says routine assignment, I'm taking a holiday. Harry laughed. You're lying. You'll be the first one there. Probably, Ron confessed with a smile. Suddenly, an owl tapped on the window. A large gray one, with an envelope in its beak. Harry opened the window and took the letter. The owl flew back into the morning sky. On the envelope, neatly written, were the words, to Harry Potter. Personal. He opened the letter and began to read. Dear Harry, I am writing to you from Hogwarts. 2 weeks have passed since I started working here as the librarian's assistant. Professor McGonagall accepted my father's locket. It is now in the restricted section, under protective charms. I have received permission to study it under her supervision. Every day I go into that small office, sit at the desk, and review my father's memories. His notes, his knowledge. It's hard, sometimes painful. I see things he did, dark things, but I also see why he did them. How he tried to make amends. How he loved me and my mother, even though he couldn't be there. Professor McGonagall is helping me understand. She tells me about my father, not as a hero or a villain, but as a man. Complex but real. I have decided to dedicate my life to continuing his work. Not dark magic, but protection from it. I want to become a potions master like him. I want to teach here at Hogwarts. To show students that every person has a choice. That a legacy does not define us. Thank you, Harry, for fulfilling my father's request. For helping me find my path. If you are ever at Hogwarts, please visit. I brew tea. Not as good as my father brewed potions, but I try. With respect and gratitude. Tobias Snape. Harry finished the letter and put it down. He looked out the window, where London stretched out beyond the glass, vast, noisy, full of secrets and opportunities. From Tobias? Ron asked. Yes, Harry smiled. He's at Hogwarts, studying his father's legacy. Happy. A good ending. Ron leaned back in his chair. It doesn't always happen that way. No, Harry agreed. Not always. He looked at the wall opposite his desk. There, between the official posters and instructions, hung a small portrait. Harry had hung it a week ago, found it in the Ministry archives, among old photographs of Hogwarts professors. Severus Snape gazed out from the portrait. Younger than Harry remembered him, but with the same piercing look. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. He just watched. And suddenly, for the first time in all these days, Snape slowly nodded. Once, barely noticeable. Acknowledgement. Harry nodded back.